I hereby call the Des Moines City Council, regular City Council meeting on June 9th to order. And I'd like to welcome everybody for the first time we've been back in public to the dais. I think a round of applause is in order. With that being said, I will have Councilmember Nutting lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Councilmember Nutting. Are there any correspondence? Oh, I'm sorry. Let the record reflect that all 7 council members are present. Is there any correspondence?
Thank you, Mayor. We received an email today from a resident who witnessed the very successful Argosy 8th grade boat tour this afternoon. Too bad it wasn't yesterday when it was better weather. And we received the following written public comment. Sandy Butler, demolition of landmark. Bob Emery, landmark on the Sound. Sherry Halco, quarterdeck. Lloyd Little, landmark on the Sound preservation. Charles O'Donnell, Masonic Home demolition permit, compelling issues. George Pettibone, landmark on the Sound. Del Rivero, Underwood Park for Little League State Softball Championships, July 8th through the 14th. Quinn Rose, let the landmark go. Patrice Thorell, public comment, June 9th, 2022, City Council meeting regarding parks and recreation update. And that concludes written public comment, Mayor, and I'll go get the sheet for
Really quick point of order here. Are we having a hearing issue?
I can hardly hear you, and I can't hear nothing coming out of the phone.
Okay, we'll address that. Thank you. That's what I can do for you today. It is now time for comment from the public and written public comments. I would just like to remind those participants that any person making personal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks or who become boisterous, threatening, or personally abusive while addressing the council will be removed from the meeting. When it is your time to speak, you may turn your, well, you won't have to turn your camera on. You will have 3 minutes to speak. So we're going to go in the order of Mr. Lloyd Little. You have. Go ahead and come to the podium, sir.
Set my timer here. Okay. Stop watch. Okay, thank you, Des Moines City Council and public. It's a pleasure to be here. Before I start, I just want to say thank you to the Des Moines PD. I think they do an outstanding job compared to, other cities around here and the nation as a whole. I feel real safe, and I really appreciate what they do. And thank you to the City Council for supporting them. And yeah, just shout out to the Des Moines PD. Okay, so thank you for having me here today. It's a pleasure. And I'm a 20-year Des Moines resident, and I just want to advocate on behalf of the landmark on the Sound. As a little kid, before I even moved here, it made a huge impression on me. It's probably the first thing I remember about Des Moines. And I think it makes a huge impression on everybody. It really is at the heart of Des Moines. I mean, the city is nice, but there's nothing like that in the city, like the main driveway, compared to landmark on the Sound. It's like world class. It's the type of thing you'd see in Europe or something like that. And of course, built by the Masons, who are known throughout history for amazing architecture. I just want to ask the council and the public, are we investing in the future of our city, or are we trying to destroy the heart of it? I mean, I get that, development and housing and things like that have their place. I'm not against that. I support it. I'm a free enterprise person. But it's like you don't want to tear down Mount Rainier National Park to put in parking lots. Or, there's a reason Paris has the Eiffel Tower and they preserve it. It draws people in. It's spectacular. It says something about the community and the people. That was given to us by people with a vision 100 years ago. What are we doing to honor that? What are we doing to make it even higher as a people? Are we going to tear that down? Is that our legacy to generations 100 years from now? What are they going to come when they see there? Are they going to see a parking lot? I mean, I think we got to go higher as a community. I think it's stalled out, and I'm not blaming anybody. It just kind of never got momentum, and so like this is a quick fix, but we got to think beyond quick fix. We could do City Hall. There's state support for it. Tina Orwell, Senator Karen Kaiser, Dow Constantine, all are behind preserving it. You could do Cultural Center, Art Gallery, Museum. You could do collaborations with the indigenous tribes around here. I mean, they've gotten short thrift, right? There's kind of a big push nowadays to recognize indigenous stuff. And we have a few signs down at the marina about some of the things they did. They were a part of this community too. If you really want to get out there, you could set up a longhouse on the grass out there and collaborate. And it's right next to SeaTac Airport. We got the light rail. You come in. I mean, you're talking about building a world-class city. And so with that, I'll wrap up and saying Des Moines needs to think higher, think bigger, and go world-class, not bringing us down. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Little. The next person for public comment will be Jamie Wagner.
Okay, this is the first time I've ever done this, so bear with me. My name is Jamie Wagner. I live in the south end of the Woodmont area of Des Moines. Good evening, City Council. As many of you know, I spend more than a fair amount of my personal time trying to help reunite the lost and found pets of Des Moines with their owners via social media, Nextdoor, and Paw Boost. I have also picked up found animals and driven them to CARES or turned them over to previous animal control officers, including a deceased cat in February. I'm a little disappointed in the lack of transparency with the community in regards to transitioning to CARES. I would have liked to see the Public Safety Committee shown an actual bid by RASC in the PowerPoint they were shown. I also have some concerns about the contract. It is unclear to me if CARES will be required also to always share information regarding animals brought in, neglect cases they are working on, and complaints they may receive about their operations with the city and/or the police chief. I want them to be required quarterly at minimum without needing to be specifically requested by the city manager or the chief of police. It is also not clear if the limited commissioned officer within Burien CARES will be subject to the same background checks that ACO Magnuson and ACO Etchell were required to pass for employment. And does Burien CARES actually employ an individual that can pass such a background check? I also believe any records regarding animal control calls still need to be subject to public records requests. Sorry, I got to take you. Whether it is the CARES officer or a Des Moines PD officer responding. And lastly, if or when the contract is signed, I want to see the city do some serious advertising of the change and supply the appropriate phone numbers for people to call animal control when they're needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wagner, and you did fine. The next person for public comment is Kayleen Moon.
Good evening to all of you. I'm here to speak about the Senior Center new contract or the renewal of the contract. My history is that I've lived in Des Moines since 1958. I worked for senior services and centers and in the aging program. I became very active at the Des Moines Senior Center in 1997, served on their advisory council for several years prior to now. My husband drove the senior shuttle for 16 years at Des Moines. I moved to Wesley in July of 2016. And I just want to recap some of my reactions to the contract that I just recently saw and only became aware that, yes, there's a meeting today, so I better get myself together. And I hope my comments are coherent, but I attended a meeting at the Des Moines Senior Center on May of 2018 when it was announced that the Des Moines Senior Center would be taken over by Wesley. I happened to be standing next to Karen Kaiser, our senator, and she looked at me and said, well, that's a conflict of interest. And I agreed. Well, at that time, and now, my great concern is there had not been any input from the seniors at either Des Moines Senior Center or at Wesley. My question is why? I feel good practice would be to get input from those that are affected. I just recently read the contract that is being proposed. And I've been again on the advisory council at the Senior Center since 2019. So I just recently saw that proposal, and so this will not be a comprehensive review or critic, but mainly my long-term concern that there was then no public process, and again this time with the renewal of the contract, I've seen nothing either at the Senior Center or through Wesley. City manager proposed 9 months pilot project with evaluations prior to renewal. Where have the evaluations been? As advisory council rep as well, I asked this question. I did not see the Wesley monitor customer satisfaction. Oops, nor it has been required by the city council or any other employee. This is an extremely important program that did attempt to reach both parties to live up to their agreement. Before another contract is renewed, refer to Exhibit A, which states that the customer satisfaction will be maintained with quarterly reports, et cetera, et cetera.
Ms. Moon, could you wrap up your comments, please?
I would urge the council to put a hold on this contract until further input can be obtained from the constituents at the very least. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much. Would you like to be called next? Okay. I call Bree Caswell to the podium, please.
Thank you so much, Council. I appreciate you having me tonight, and I'm glad that we're back in person. What I want to share is the history of the pride flag. I think that's something that would be helpful for us to know. The original pride flag was designed in 1978 by somebody named Gilbert Baker. And Gilbert sewed the pride flag at his own table. He didn't know how to sew, so he had to teach himself. But he did it because it mattered. What he chose for significance with the colors were red for life, orange for healing, yellow for sunlight, green for nature, indigo for serenity, which I wish I had a little more of at this very moment, and violet for spirit. In 2017 came along the Philadelphia flag, which added black and brown stripes to recognize the people of color in our community, and unfortunately the discrimination that they have experienced within the LGBTQIA community. In 2018, our very own Seattle brought in a flag that incorporated both black and brown stripes and pink, light blue, and white to recognize members of the transgender, gender non-binary, and intersex communities. The Progress Pride flag has now been designed so that it also includes the intersex community with a purple circle, and that is the flag that we are presenting tonight. And we are giving and we're presenting this flag to the council. We hope that you'll fly it at either City Hall or the Marina. And we really encourage you to participate in Pride Month by doing just that. Thank you so much.
It's supposed to be this way, right? Purple top. You're supposed to be over here. Here.
We have it backwards.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Okay,
Aw.
all right. Move this way. Okay, thank you. There you go. We got it. You got the camera on it too? Oh. Yep.
We're gonna get the whole flag and both of you. Awesome.
And on behalf of the city, we accept this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, the next person signed up to speak is Megan Palmer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Megan Palmer, and I'm not as prepared as I'd like to be because I had to rush to get here. But I'd like to kind of piggyback on what Bree was just talking about and emphasize the importance of acknowledging pride in our community. Des Moines is one of few communities that to recognize pride and to really, you know, go ahead and with proclamations and to acknowledge to make the community more inclusive. And so together, several of us have formed a committee called the Waterland Pride Committee. And we are planning a series of events on Saturday, June 25th. And we brought one of our flyers here. Actually, there are several posters here to share with City Council. And on behalf of the Waterland Pride Committee, I have brought a gift for each of you. If you will accept that I will have to give to, I'll have to sort them out and give them to Bonnie to make sure, they're t-shirts, to make sure that I have the correct sizes. So we could do that after the meeting. So yeah, and then that's all I have to say. So thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to any groups, is there anyone who wishes to speak? I see two gentlemen. Rick, I'll start with you, and sir, I'll call you next. If you could put, since you're not signed up on the sheet, please state your name and the city you live in.
Rick Johnson. I've been a resident of Redondo for 66 years. I'm glad to see, well, not everybody wearing their mask. I'll tell you one thing, I got neighbors right now that have COVID. It hasn't gone away anywhere. So be safe. Anyway, hopefully I'm here representing a number of residents, and not only residents, but families and people that live out of the area that come down and use the boardwalk. The speeding, the noise, it's deafening to your ears, some of them when they go by. And they're doing it on purpose, I'm thinking, because, or they're showing off their pipes and mufflers and everything else. But I've said this before and I'll say it again. I blame the city. We've had years of where we should have had work done to close up the parking lot with locks and gates like they do down in the marina, because it's drawing all these people down. What it is an honorary system. And it take up the upper parking lot and take away the parking for trailers and cars, boat trailers. But they continue to come up there and do whatever they want to do. The graffiti's getting bad again. it's just not pleasant. And I've never seen anything like it in all the years I've lived down there. But we need to do something about it because I'm sure it would have been done long ago if it had been down here at the marina. But I guess put it on the timeline with the pier and the boat ramp and things like that. But as far as the parks and stuff like that, the city keeps the parks meticulous. They do a real good job there. And I've never had a problem with anybody doing that. But anyway, I think we need to do something down there because it draws attention to the kids that come down and park their cars up there and doing Brodies and the noise for those condominiums. I'm surprised that more people don't say something, or they just. I've been calling the police department for a couple of years now, but I've kind of stopped doing it recently because I read in the Next Door Redondo that one woman who had called the police department to complain on noise and speeding, and she said, well, we don't have that. I don't have time for that. So it kind of puts a damper on it. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Sir, if you'll take the podium and identify yourself and the city you reside in.
Good evening. My name is George Pettibone. I live in the Zenith neighborhood across the street from the towering 5-story iconic building that everybody knows about, landmark on the Sound. Also for many, many years, almost 100 years, it's been the Masonic retirement home for a bunch of men that worked real hard over many, many years and needed a place to stay. They built an iconic building that is unlike anything in the state of Washington or Oregon, maybe all the way down to California. It is the biggest thing that you can see when you go by in a boat, ship, a sailboat on the Sound from here to the Canadian border. It's an architectural masterpiece. It is an iconic symbol of this town and deserves to be taken and looked at very, very hard and long by the new owners of the property, figure out how to utilize it and generate something wonderful out of it. It is not a building that is falling apart. It's made out of solid concrete, has no structural problem that is noticed in engineering reports. It has no problem with a little bit of paint somebody sprayed on the columns out on Marine View Drive that did not hurt the structure of the building. It has no big deal with people coming and going out of it. The building is surrounded by 1 mile of barbed wire fence. It's against the law in the city of Des Moines to put barbed wire fences up in residential neighborhoods. The fence has over 80,000 sharp barbed wires on it. It's against the law in the residential neighborhoods of the city of Des Moines by the Des Moines Municipal Code. It behooves them to remove the fence and replace it with something else. You're supposed to have a 4-foot tall fence when you're on the front road going down Marine View Drive, not a 6-foot tall fence. You're supposed to have a 4-foot tall fence when you go around 240th, not 1,100 feet of barbed wire fence. So that's just kind of one of the things about the fence that irritates me. But saving it, saving the building is important to this whole city. There's 35,000 people here. There's a whole bunch of reasons to save the building. But the SEPA report is a checklist. It's required by federal law, state of Washington law, state SEPA laws. The SEPA checklist is virtually impossible to find on your website. Nobody that I have talked to except one lady was able to find the SEPA checklist. It's 14 pages long. It's filled out by the applicant who bought the property for $11 million. And that applicant says he knows that it's a big-ass thing, but I ain't going to fill it out properly. I'm not going to tell you what I want to build. I'm not going to tell you what kind of construction I want to do. I'm going to not follow any of the rules. I'm going to tell you it's a demolition permit, and you need to bring that to a halt. You have not notified the neighborhood. There is no notification in the neighborhood. It has to start over again. You need to stop and listen. You have not notified the neighbors. My neighbors on the left and the right didn't know about it. I didn't know about it. None of us received a registered letter within 300 yards of the thing. There is no public notification with 2 signs. You got to put up 11 signs. The signs have to be on the outside of the fence in order to read them. I hope that you'll take seriously thought that you have to start over. The entire thing that took place last month is a fiasco. Nobody knew it was going to happen. Nobody got notified. Thank you for your time. I appreciate your efforts to save this iconic building.
Thank you, Mr. Pettibone. Moving forward, we will call Alex Candela from Wesley up.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here this evening. And my name is Alex Candela from Wesley, Des Moines. I'm the executive director there. I also brought Naniofa Bolivar Timunga, who is our director of resident engagement, overseeing the person or the staff member helping out in the senior center. Kevin Anderson, the president and CEO of Wesley, expresses his regrets for not being able to join tonight. He also wants me to express his appreciation for the support of the council to Wesley and collaborating with us in running the senior center as well. So he sends an open invitation that Wesley will be open to any future partnership and collaboration as well. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. With that, we will move on to the city manager's report. That is the extent of the public comment. Pass that to the city clerk, please. Michael, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. It's a little strange to be back in person. Just at any rate, a couple of items that I want to go over. Let's start with the police chief talking about animal control and giving us an update on where we are with that. So there's an item, all of the things, more or less, everything we're going to address appears on the consent calendar. So this gives some background to council.
Good evening. You do have an agenda item. It's on the consent calendar for consideration of the animal control function to be contracted with Burien Cares. We did have this discussion at the Public Safety Emergency Management meeting. Our staff conducted a review. If we were to keep our own animal control officer, if we were to contract with King County, or if we were to contract with Burien Cares. My recommendation to the council and through the committee was to go with contracting with Burien Cares. They will provide us with an animal control officer for 40 hours a week to work in the city of Des Moines. We will provide that officer with a limited commission, very similar to if we had our own animal control officer. They will do educational outreach, and they will continue to house the animals like they currently do under the current contract. So our recommendation to go with Burien Cares compared to if we went with our own animal control officer hired by the city and would save our taxpayers about $70,000 to $90,000 per year going forward, not counting the $80,000 in the initial year that it would cost for a new vehicle that we won't have to purchase now. And that cost for Burien Cares is $110,000 per year for the next 3 years. We did contact King County Animal Control, RASC, provided them with our information, And they sent it to their financial people, and that would cost us over $300,000 per year. So this option saves our taxpayers about $200,000 per year in taxes for this service. The other thing with Burien Cares is they would be on call if there was an emergency, a vicious animal, dog bite. After hours, they would respond out to the scene and deal with those situations. So I do think this is in the best interest of our communities and specifically our taxpayers.
Thanks, Chief. I don't know if there are questions with the council, but one thing I want to say is, we really appreciate the degree to which you've looked at this carefully to come to that conclusion and recommendation.
Councilmember Steinmetz?
Hi, can you hear me okay through the?
Yes, sir. I hope you can hear me too.
I can hear you fine. So you asked, was there a formal bid process that RASC didn't respond to, or can you tell us a little bit more about where else you reached out to try to get a bidding process?
Yeah, we reached out to King County RASC. Initially, we looked at the internet at their website, and we put in our numbers and estimated that it would cost about $300,000. And I knew this would be a very good question, so I asked Assistant Chief Cooey to actually reach out and talk to the people at King County RASC. So he talked to the management at their facility. They took our information, number of animals generally taken in, population. They factored in 3 or 4 different areas. It took them about 3 weeks to respond to us, and they did respond. And I'm going off the top of my head. We had that sheet that I had filled out, but I believe it was $317,000. I know it was around $300,000 per year. So it was, well, 3 times as much as Burien Cares.
And are you aware of any plans to promote or to publicize how to call, who to call, what to do when you have an animal, and what is the plan for that?
Absolutely. We have talked about that. There is a plan that we're working on, specifically Commander Richards, but we don't want to get out ahead of ourselves. We wanted to make sure that this would be approved by the council. If it is approved, we then are going to move forward with social media and various other aspects, working with our city clerk, Bonnie, and we're going to do everything we can to get that information out. We just have to wait until we have authority, if we get authority.
And then lastly, this is kind of a unique service that, are there any other entities in King County that could actually do this service? And if so, was there an effort made to contact them?
I'm not aware of any others that could handle our service in King County. I believe King County RASC serves, if I recall correctly, 24 jurisdictions within the county. And, but other than that, I'm not aware of any others besides Burien.
Mayor?
Thank you.
Councilmember Harris?
Chief, so let's say a resident has a bad experience with the handling of a call for service, okay? How would that be handled?
That would be handled with a complaint to my office, and we would address it, and we would investigate the incident, and we would work that out with Burien Cares, just like if we contracted with anybody else or it was our own.
But it's the police department that would be in charge of investigating or administering that complaint.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yeah, thanks, Chief, for the report. There was a question by one of our folks that made two questions, I think. The quality assurance, how is that handled? And the person will be have a partial commission, and with those background checks, I'm sure. So, could you just maybe expound on that just a little bit?
Yes, so there will be a background check on the animal control officer assigned to the city of Des Moines, and once that is passed or not, we would provide them with a limited commission, very similar to what we had with our own animal control officers. The other question.
The quality assurance and how to make sure that our customers are receiving or being, getting the service that we're expecting them to.
So I'm absolutely certain that I will hear about it if there is any service that is not at the highest level from our community, and would fully expect that, and we will do our best to deal with that and manage that. I will say, though, because there's this thing that King County RASC and King County Animal Control is, although they cost a lot of money, for 29 years I worked in another jurisdiction, and 7.5 of that as a police chief, where we did contract with King County RASC. And I can tell you I had more complaints about that service than just about any other issue that I had as a police chief at that jurisdiction. So just to be completely honest, that's a tough job. People are going to complain about it. I'll tell you, when we had animal control officers assigned to the Des Moines Police Department, there's not one function in the Des Moines Police Department that generated more complaints than the animal control officer. And in fact, in 1 year, the animal control officer accounted for more complaints than the rest of the police department combined. So I can tell you that is a function that generates a lot of attention and complaints.
So just one follow-up, if I may. Did you reach out? I think Burien uses animal care, or Burien Cares. Did you happen to reach out to them, and what was their response, the chief of Burien?
Yeah, so we reached out to the police chief in Burien and the Burien city personnel, and both were extremely pleased and had nothing but high praises for the service they are receiving from Burien Cares.
Right, thank you.
Councilmember Oxiger?
Yes, Chief. Another point that was brought up is is there a formal reporting process? In some of our contracts, we require quarterly reports, whatever. The way I read it in the current contract is, or the proposed contract, is that it's as needed. Shouldn't there be a more formalized reporting process?
So I will say, I have never seen, when we had our own animal control, we never had a periodic or quarterly or semi-annually reporting process for animal control. I know Councilmember Steinmetz had brought up in conversations, hey, how do we really manage if they're effective or they're not, or if they're not effective, how can we address that and how can we deal with that situation? So we talked about performance measures, and I talked about that with our city attorney, Tim George, and what we were concerned with is you can't think of everything on a performance measure, and if they do something that's bad enough, but it doesn't meet our identified performance measures, we may not be able to cancel the contract. So what we went with was something that's very common in many of our contracts, and that is, if we're not satisfied, we don't even have to give a reason. I believe it's 60 days, and we can cancel that contract, and then we would move on. So basically, we have a no cause out if we want that. If they're not performing to our standards, we'll just cancel the contract. And with, you may see in the agenda item, we had to work with our Des Moines Police Guild, and because that was a job, that was a union job. So part of the deal is if we cancel the contract, we will go back and that position will become a position that we test for and hire internally like we had in the past, because that was part of our deal with the guild.
Well, I would certainly hope that we wouldn't get to the point where it's, you have to dismiss them without, some sort of feedback in order to try and, remedy the situation. Is there any way that we can, set up this is a first-time issue with us. It's apparently, similar to a pilot project. How can we come back and review this? How can the public have input on whether this is working for them or not?
Well, I'm not sure exactly where it's going to go. I can guarantee you if it's not working for the public, I'm going to know, and we're going to have that conversation. And you're right, we shouldn't just cancel without talking with the entity, knowing that if there's problems, hey, there's a problem, let's fix it, and we have the conversation and give them the opportunity to fix it. But I don't think a quarterly report done by Burien Cares is going to help us identify if we have any problems. I truly believe I'm going to know about that, and you're going to know about that, and the mayor's going to know about that, and the city manager's going to know about that way before it ever got to a quarterly report.
Thank you.
Council, or Deputy Mayor Buxton?
Thank you, and I also I appreciate that essentially this isn't really a pilot program because Burien has been using CARES for a long time and has a contract, so kind of like the recent ordinance that we just passed in another area where we're able to use the work of other cities in designing an ordinance that, like the parking ordinance, well, this is a little bit the same. This is an agency that's already been working for a long time, and so I'm assuming that they've been able to work out a lot of the bugs, and I agree with you. I think you'll hear a long time before a quarterly report, and I also appreciate the work and the patience, because I think if it were up to you, this would have been able to come to the table last fall. And so there's just a lot of components that need to be put together to finally bring something like this to the table and to the vote, and a lot of conversation and a lot of work behind the scenes. So I appreciate the patience, I appreciate the work, and I appreciate the research. And dotting the i's and crossing the t's and listening to the concerns of the community when designing this contract as well. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and I just want to be very clear. This is not going to be a perfect process. I've worked with King County, it wasn't perfect or even close. We had our own, it wasn't perfect. This one won't be perfect. We will work and do our very best to make it as best as we can possibly be. I don't want to set up unrealistic expectations. This is a tough project, and we're going to do the best we can, and I think this is our best path forward.
City Manager Mathias?
Yeah, thank you, Chief. Appreciate the points you're making. One thing I want to mention to council is there are two motions involved with this item. And the second motion is approving an MOU with the Des Moines Police Guild, authorizing the city to contract out, because this is part of a guild position. And I just want to acknowledge our appreciation for the efforts of the guild to get us to this point where we have some discretion in how we go about doing this. And I think that the guild, once again, is trying to find the best way to serve the city, so they approved this. So I think that's important, and I wanted to make that part of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Steinmetz?
Chief, I just want to say, I know a lot of work has gone into this. You mentioned I raised some issues along the way. We've had several conversations about this. I appreciate your openness and your willingness to take feedback and incorporate that in. So, I just want to say, I think that there has been a lot of thought that's gone into this, and I appreciate all of that. The other day, I believe it was in the citizens statistics, I assume, correct? Those aren't going away. So there's always going to be some data about the calls we're getting and presumably what happened in those calls, was an animal apprehended or not, because we need those numbers to know how much we're going to essentially pay for your care for the animals. So we do have data that we can look at. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. We'll continue to track the exact same data.
Thank you. I think you can go on with your next subject.
Yeah, thank you. Next, I want to talk about, and we're going to have a presentation in a second, regarding our comprehensive emergency management plan. This is an effort that we will, Shannon Kirchberg, our Director of Emergency Management, will provide. I just want to give council a little background on this. We had, I don't want to characterize it as less than a priority, but the city's response to emergency management at times in the past was not with the same level of dedication and resources and commitment that we've seen recently. And recently started with 2017, the mayor at that time, Mayor Pina, myself, and about 13 members of our staff, a few of them are in the audience, attended a National Emergency Management Institute week-long workshop in Emmitsburg, Maryland. And we also, at that point, were joined with Federal Way in their emergency management. They had about 60 people in the room, and we had about 15. But we went through that process, and one of the things that was striking was that the emergency management instructors, all of whom had very responsible jobs, a number of them had been involved with 9/11 in New York and other serious incidents. When they discovered we had a marina and that we had a supply of fuel and that we had access to the airport and some other pieces, they really turned their attention on Des Moines and came up with recommendations. We had one of their instructors come out and spend a couple of days with us. I remember they met with he met with the council. And we also had the benefit at that point, our deputy mayor, soon to become fire chief, was helpful to us in looking at emergency management issues. And coming back from Emmitsburg, we started to commit resources and time and effort to emergency management for our city. And this has culminated now in a comprehensive emergency management plan. And Shannon will present that to the council, but just a couple of other things. All of this was tested in the fire of COVID. And we were able to open up an emergency operations center with the fire district, with our police department, with the emergency medical teams. And that was very successful in tracking and trying to prevent the spread of COVID, which I think that that our particular community and our agencies were very fortunate in the outcomes that we were able to achieve. So the other part of that was that in the past, I think emergency management has been considered more the province of first responders. And that was the way the city dealt with it in the past. At Emmitsburg, we learned the importance of focusing on what's called recovery. What's the second step? What happens next? What happens to destroyed buildings and all of that? And the first real test of addressing emergency management came not from an external event, which is typically what you plan for in emergency management. What we have instead was what we would call an insular event, a pandemic that attacks from within and is not visible. Completely different than a bridge collapsing or having an issue with the roadway or a toxic spill or something like that. Very different. And so all of those created challenges. But I'm really pleased, having been involved with this, having been real time in Florida on 9/11, being barricaded in a bunker with other emergency management officials and police trying to identify what other targets might exist in South Florida. Because at that point, the degree to which what was happening in New York and elsewhere, nobody knew what the extent of that was. We also had the president at that point in Florida that day. So it's a serious thing to do. And so Shannon's moved forward with creating this emergency management plan. And I don't know if she'll say this, but one thing I want to say is we have aspects in our plan that are innovative to the state, things that other jurisdictions have not yet done that the state has supported. They review what we've done. They've approved the plan we submitted. It rests for council to approve that as well, and that becomes our working document. So with that, Shannon has done an incredible job of helping us through the pandemic and working on emergency management. Take it away.
Thank you, City Manager Mathias. Good evening, Mayor Mahoney. Good evening, Council. My name is Shannon Kirchberg. I am the Director of Emergency Management and Workplace Safety. I am going to walk you through our comprehensive emergency management plan process. So let me tell you what a comprehensive emergency management plan is, or better known as a CEMP. So this document identifies how the city and its individual departments coordinates emergency management actions, resources, and activities in working with other agencies, including federal, state, regional, private sector, non-government organizations, and the community as a whole. Very important, emergency management focuses on the whole community. The CMPE state requirements requires that the City of Des Moines review, update, or completely rewrite its CEMP every 5 years and submit it to the state for a full review. The state makes recommendations for improvement, and those improvements can be called out to be done immediately or over the next 5 years. No plan is perfect, no plan is ever complete. City staff started working on this plan back in 2001, and every single one of them loves me. We had the pleasure of working with Sarah Miller, who used to be our zone coordinator with Seattle-King County. She now has her own consulting firm, SK Miller Consulting, and she helped walk us through this process because we did not review and update our existing plan. We completely deconstructed and rebuilt our plan. Each department reviewed and rebuilt their individual department annexes. So each department has their individual department annex they can reach in and pull out in case of an emergency. Works kind of like a checklist. We did change the plan format, which I'm going to go into in a minute, and we submitted our plan to the state of Washington on February 3rd of 2022. So what does this plan include? So it includes a base plan, right? So it talks about the easiest way to look at it is a 30,000-foot level view of the plan. We have our individual department annexes, which each department, thank you to every one of you. They put many hours into this plan, and I think we put out an incredible product. Then we get into the essential elements of information. EEIs are the information that we need to know when we enter an emergency. I like to call it the who, what, where, when, why, and how of the emergency. This is the information that you need to know as soon as you walk into that EOC so that we can start making decisions and planning for what's coming next. It also includes the Inclusive Emergency Communication Plan, the IECP, which is our communication plan out to the community, not only in English, but also in our top 4 languages spoken by the top 3% population in the city of Des Moines other than English. So ours incorporates Spanish, Korean, Tagalog, and we also included Vietnamese. So this basically translates our English boilerplate messages into those languages so we can get it out through social media quickly. Our revised CEMP for the city of Des Moines, we moved away from what is called ESFs. So those are emergency support functions, and you can see those on the right. And if you read through those, you're going to notice that there's a number of those that the city of Des Moines relies on its community partners to handle. We have agreements with utilities, we have agreements with transportation. We're a very small city, and we rely on our partners. So it made a lot of sense to move away from the ESFs, and the state introduced a new departmental-based plan, which takes the ESFs and assigns them by department. That way we could build a department plan and get away from the essential emergency functions. So what's in the basic plan? Introduction, purpose, mission. You can read all of this, the concept of operations, direction, and control. Also, it lists out the organization, not just our day-to-day organization and how we function at the city day-to-day, but also how we're gonna function at the Emergency Operations Center. Because we could show up at the Emergency Operations Center and the person that's in charge up there may not be your typical boss. So it could be somebody completely different that's gone through a different training set than you have, and they have a different authority when we're up at the EOC. Responsibilities, the government role, incident management, critical tasks, communications, which is part of that communication plan that we were talking about earlier. Administrations, basically how we document what the process is, how we retain that. Finance, logistics, development, and maintenance plans, and different appendices, terms and definitions, acronyms, authorities. And then these are all the different department annexes. These are all the individuals, all the departments, basically everybody, that was involved in building this plan. Numerous hours, so many Zoom calls because we couldn't meet face to face. These people are incredible. They did a great job, and I wouldn't have been able to do it without any of them. Supporting documents, we did our hazard mitigation plan back in 2019, and it's attached to the county hazard mitigation plan. We're an annex in there. Our inclusive emergency communication plan, which we talked about. In addition, we need our EOC documents, our position task books, and descriptions and checklists. And we are lucky enough to be working with Pierce College. They picked the City of Des Moines as their capstone project, and they are writing all of these very long, detailed documents for us, and they should be delivered here within the next couple of weeks. So we're looking forward to seeing those, and a huge thank you to Pierce College for partnering with the City of Des Moines. Additional plans that we're going to be working on hopefully this year will be resource typing and tracking so that we do match the FEMA resource tracking and typing. So if we need to go for reimbursement due to an emergency, we have the right typing to get reimbursed appropriately, and rapid assessment guides and training. So the comprehensive emergency plan was due to the state in 2021. However, due to COVID, we did ask for an extension and were granted such to February of 2022. Due to turnover at the state, it took a little bit to get it back, but we did. We got our review back, and it was completed on April 13th of 2022, and it reads, because it's little up there, Dear Manager Kirchberg, thank you for submitting your Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan, CEMP, for our review as required under Title 38.52070 RCW. Congratulations on completing this significant endeavor. Your CEMP demonstrated significant development. The enclosed documents provide a compilation of recommendations for your next planning and review cycle, addressing the lawful requirement category will ensure your CMPE's continued consistency with the state CEMP. With the state CEMP and incorporated industry best practices. The Washington State Emergency Management Division looks forward to receiving your CEMP again in 5 years. And then to better use the core capabilities while also making the CMPE a more operational document, CMP development has drastically changed in Washington. Should you need additional state information and assistance, please contact EMD Planning Section. So pursuant to Des Moines Municipal Code, Council will perform legislative duties as the situation demands and as it is requested by the incident commander. City Council will receive updates through emergency management through the EOC by the emergency emergency management activities as is appropriate. City Council responsibilities during an emergency is to ratify city manager proclamations, policies, finance requests as needed for timely response as appropriate to the incident. And elected officials may be called upon to ratify policies and participate in media events. We do rely on you guys to stand up in front of those cameras. And this would be directed by our PIO or Public Information Officer as requested by Incident Command. So what are the next steps? Next steps after this is signed and approved by council, hard copies would go to each department up to the EOC. They would be sent out to all of our community partners. We would also load a copy or a link on our city website and make sure that everybody has digital copies as well. Then we exercise, review, and update.
Shannon, thank you. I just want to make one comment relative to the role of council. As emergency management has progressed literally as a science, there's been a focus on having the experts conduct the process, and that primarily means utilizing incident command systems. We've asked council to participate in both the ICS training and the National Incident Management System training, NIMS, to understand the process. The engagement of council is literally at the request of the incident commander, just so everyone's clear on the role. However, we do ask your approval for this plan when it comes up on consent. I think, Shannon, you're willing to take any questions?
Sure.
Councilmember Pennington?
Having a little bit of history in the city with emergency management, and we discussed this at the public safety meeting, which I won't get into a whole lot because I'll let Deputy Mayor Buxton give that report. But the history was literally, it was Officer Richards and myself that did emergency management for the city for a number of years. And I have to tell you, and that's been over the course of probably 25 plus years, where the city has come just in the last few years, and the work that Shannon has done, and having been able to witness the depth and the level of work with COVID and working with her almost on a daily basis, the commitment by the city manager, by the city staff, by every one of our city employees to turn this into to bring it into the culture of the city is, and believe me, in over 40 years, I've seen a lot of different organizations, and the speed and the proficiency that this city has come up to the level they are today is absolutely second to none. And it's amazing, but the only reason that happened is because everybody in this city, the council to every one of our employees, has embraced this. They've made it a part of the culture. The success that the city has had during COVID and continues to have is because of the ability to be flexible, the ability to work with everyone in the city, in the region. The relationships are, and the city, I can say with all the confidence, had you not embraced this change in culture a few years ago, would be in a much different place today relative to public safety, relative to what we just went through and are continuing to go through with COVID. So everybody here deserves a huge thank you, because what it's done for our citizens is it really has made our city much safer, whether it be this pandemic or whether it be the airplane that drops out of the sky, whether it be what's going on in the rest of the country with these mass shootings. The structure in what you do and who is involved is the same. And the end results are because of this type of planning and working through this. So thank you all very much for that.
City Manager, I'd just like to add, for the public, the council was asked to go through approximately about 8 hours of training from the FEMA website, and it was intense. I was actually very shocked. I thought it'd be kind of a layup training, and it was very in-depth. And what it came out of that was I understood through that process how to read that document. And I saw it more of in a non-defining way that didn't really adapt to the city. But when I read the document, Shannon, you know, and so essentially I got 8 hours of training to learn how to read that document correctly, right? And I did. I found it very comprehensive. I can assure the residents that this emergency plan is put in here that you can be assured that this city is gonna represent us very well should some kind of incident occur. Again, and I would say congratulations to Michael and the rest of the city staff. The pandemic we've just been through, and we're not out of quite yet, is a proven example, but what you learned from that and how you took those documents was very impressive. So I also have to agree with Councilmember Pennington that it was one hell of a job. I'll go with Councilmember Harris first, then you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, the ICS NIMS training, what's that old joke about, you know, it was like the longest weekend of my life was just those couple of hours. And it really is a heck of a thing. It really does build confidence that there is a system. My only, you know, just not to get overconfident is I still feel like there are gaps in terms of communicating with the public in case something, you know, happens. It's just still, it's really challenging to get the word out. And, you know, that's the ongoing thing. I think you guys are all going to do the right things, but, you know, reaching all 33,000 people is going to be something else. So thank you very much.
Deputy Mayor Buxton.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the work. It's pretty incredible, like you said, that, you know, we have this training, but then for you to go through all this. And I was pretty impressed. I misspoke at the public safety meeting about the collaboration with the college being Highline College, but it's pretty impressive that the college that wants to take on this project in another county decides to pick a city outside of their own county and picked us. They must have been pretty impressed with our work to be able to decide they want to collaborate and partner with us. So kudos to you for arranging that and nurturing that relationship. And I'm pretty impressed with the work and the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, yeah. You know, to continue, so we had an item identified for summer events, but because we're in the process of receiving some applications from different entities, we're going to wait and do that on the 23rd, update everyone with what's going on that we're aware of. The last thing that I want to talk about is Councilmember Pennington sent me a request to talk about something called disposable income and to explain what it is. And the context that came up, there was a social media post that a food truck had decided to leave the city, and the social media message in response said, well, we're a city of 32,000 and we don't have much disposable income. And
No,
so.
that's not what was said. I'm sorry.
Councilmember Steinmetz, let him finish.
He's referring to, and he should not be misrepresenting.
Councilmember Steinmetz, he has the floor. I'll give you the floor in a second because you can respond in a question.
I'm not sure why this is being talked about in public. I think this is totally inappropriate.
I'm going to allow it for the point to the public.
Councilmember, I thought it was important that there be accuracy in the description of this city relative to economic development. I did not find that in your post, but I didn't name you. I'm just saying that was the basis with which Councilmember Pennington asked me to talk about this. And so that may be uncomfortable for you, but I'll explain to you why it's uncomfortable for all of us. I'm going to tell you a little about why I can speak to this. Okay? I can speak to this because as a graduate student at Cambridge University, I was part of something called the Marshall Economic Society. Marshall, there are about 35 of us, and what happened was every other week we met, about 35 people met with the Nobel laureate. And then we had one-on-one discussions with those Nobel laureates. And from that, I was trained in the Cambridge School, which is primarily Keynesian economics. And I wanted to just walk through and describe what exactly disposable income is and, you know, what's the meaning of our buying power in this city. So with that, I think I will proceed. Bonnie, could you call up the PowerPoint? Disposable income. What is it? It's the amount of money left after taxes are deducted. It's a gross number. It's not explicit to consumption. How is it analyzed? Generally, disposable income is a function of household income, and it's typically measured in a macro dynamic, meaning a large-scale dynamic, not for small individual cities, but rather in metro areas and regional groupings. So it's very difficult to establish disposable income specifically for a smaller city like ourselves. Are there better tools to measure wealth and spending? Yes. Next, please. So probably a better thing to talk about is what's called discretionary income. And that takes into account your essential household expenditures, housing, food, healthcare costs, fuel, utilities. What's left after that is, then the question becomes, what do households, consumers do with resources beyond essential purchases? So what's left over after you've paid the basic stuff you have to come up with every month? And that leads us to what's called the marginal propensity to consume. Next, please. So the marginal propensity to consume, which has been around for a long time, and I'll talk about that in a minute, attempts to capture the behavior of consumers, savers based on an increase in wages or government outlays. The MPC addresses on the margin, which is typically how economics analyzes things, the use of an additional dollar of income. What percentage of a dollar would go to consumption rather than other uses such as paying off debt or savings? So let's just take a quick look at what this is. Next, please. So it attempts to capture the behavior of consumers based on a marginal increase in wages or government outlays. Government outlays can occur to address hardship, emergency, other economic challenges. The assumption is that a change in income will result in a change in economic behavior. More money, typically you will get more consumption. The general theory by John Maynard Keynes argued that income distribution affected consumption. This is back in the 30s, and they were just going through a global depression. And what Keynes was starting to suggest was the role government could play in recovery from that depression. So people with it, and it was assumed that people with a higher marginal propensity to consume would result in increased amount of dollars allocated to consumption. And these, I'm just documenting where these came from. Recent research by the National Bureau of Economic Research of the US has established that marginal propensity to consume are extremely important for the macroeconomic effect of shocks. Okay, and primarily in economics, what you're looking for and concerned about are what are called exogenous shocks. Shocks from without the system, not in the economic system, but that affect it. And for example, COVID, which resulted in constrained economic activity because we no longer had freedom of association, and that contracted the economy. Next, please. It's a mathematical expression. I didn't put it up, don't have to really go into it. It's about some deltas and some changes. But it's an expression for consumption and savings behavior based on access to resources. The danger is that people will save and not spend, which is a function of risk adversity and confidence in the economy. This was absolutely borne out in the CARES and unemployment payments to U.S. wage earners affecting consumption. One of the more interesting things that's currently happening with the economy is that as interest rates have increased, inflation has increased, so many people took the money that came from the CARES, the ARPA money, the unemployment benefits, and saved them, that people are now able to address some of the troughs that are occurring because of cost and the devaluation of money through interest rate structure. They saved money and they're able to survive and spend that money now. So looking back, that was probably a good thing, but it was unpredicted. Next, please. Keynesian economics addresses increasing aggregate demand. Aggregate demand is the demand on the economy to provide goods and services. Okay, so if you can expand that aggregate demand, you can try to weather the shock of economic dysfunction or recession. It's what we try to do locally with the EATS program, put money into the economy by getting it in the hands of the restaurateurs so they could continue to provide the level of service and pay wages and do whatever they needed to do with the money. So government can attempt to foster an increased demand and economic activity through monetary policy, which is as we went through the recession years ago. It was quantitative easing, where they lowered interest rates by putting more money into the economy. Now we're going through quantitative tightening, which is they're contracting the money supply, which is raising the interest rate just to control economic activity, but a lot of that is the result of these exogenous shocks coming from increased fuel prices as a function of the war in Europe, and COVID and other things that affected that. Through fiscal policy, the other way they can affect the economy is through fiscal policy, and that's the 1.9 trillion ARPA, for example, that was put into the economy. In a Keynesian world, and this is not the world that all people believe in, but it's what I was trained in and believe is true. In a Keynesian world, government debt plays a role in accelerating the increase in aggregate demand. You don't just wait for the economic processes to evolve. You actually intervene as the 1.9 trillion. You intervene to try to change the economic dynamic for the better. And that can create government debt, and that's also an issue, but that's a separate issue. Next, please. So, stating our city has low disposable income without any data to support that is incorrect. An important element for marina redevelopment and increased economic activity in our downtown and community rests with demand factors moving toward critical mass. There are multiple factors that affect that. The business park with about 3,000 to 4,000 new employees, that was money that was brought into the city, and a lot of that is spent in a discretionary manner. That's good for us. That's one of the reasons we have the shuttle that goes from the Angle Lake Station through the business park to the downtown and marina, hoping people will get on that and come downtown and spend money. And that's been the case in a number of instances. Anyways, next, please. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about, and bear with me because I'm almost done. We have two people. One lives in Des Moines, the other in Seattle. They have similar jobs at a corporation, and they're paid the same wage. The Des Moines resident pays $2,500 in housing costs. The Seattle resident pays $4,000 in housing costs. Which one has the higher discretionary income available for consumption? Okay, the answer is the Des Moines resident, who has less of his income going for the cost of residential payments than the person in Seattle. So in that case, and that's the comparative advantage that South King County is experiencing right now relative to housing costs, land costs, all of those are less expensive than in Seattle or in Bellevue. So that's one of the reasons there's so much development occurring from SeaTac Airport to the south, all the way to Tacoma, because there's a comparative advantage for our city relative to other cities. Next, please. So why does it matter? And anecdotally, and why take the time to go through this? And I appreciate your patience, and I'm sorry if it's not perfectly clear. But It's complicated. The reason it matters is that within the day of that post coming out, I was giving a tour to a very well-known restaurant company that specializes in seafood. And they were taking a tour of the city to see if they were interested in locating in Des Moines. And they told me they were. They want to come here. They want to be part of the marina redevelopment. They want to locate in our city. Okay? The last thing I want them to hear is that we don't have any money to support them, which I don't believe is true, but which also has a result. So I appreciate your time and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this, and that concludes our report, Mayor.
All right, I'm going to allow Councilmember Steinmetz to respond.
I think that was a better waste of time. I don't know why it is significant even after this presentation. I'd just like to read you the dictionary definition from Oxford Language Dictionary of disposable income, which is income remaining after the deductions of taxes and other mandatory charges, which you left out entirely, available to be spent as one wishes. And they use it as a sentence. The rents of the tenants in work reach 21% of their disposable income. There are so many things that go into disposable income. And I'm not going to try to give it less than anybody, and you're perfectly capable of doing that. But the point is, this was a Facebook post. This was a Facebook post in response to Momo's telling us they were leaving. And I felt sorry for them. I think it's tough. I think it's tough that they did. You know, they set up a trailer and tried to make a go of it. But the price, you know, I don't want to even. You know, I'm very sorry to see that. I had planned to reach out to you and ask for a sit down. I'm not sure we can right now. And that's a terrible thing, because we've had some good conversations before. But in the 6 months that I have been on this council, I have seen nothing from you but resistance and negative attacks. And I don't understand that at all. We have a great opportunity here to move this city forward. Let's do it.
Thank you, Councilmember Steinmetz. I think it's best we leave this as it is. This is all just challenge both of you to communicate with each other and work on the thing. So with that, we're going to move to the consent agenda. Will the deputy clerk please read the consent agenda?
Item 1, approval of vouchers. Item 2, approval of minutes. Item 3, comprehensive emergency management plan 2021. Item 4, contract for senior services. Item 5, animal control and shelter services agreement and police guild MOU. Item 6, 2022 Des Moines Farmers Market. Item 7, disposable abandoned vessels within the Des Moines Marina. Item 8, interlocal agreement between the cities of SeaTac, Des Moines, Covington, and Tukwila for planning, funding, and implementation of a joint minor home repair program. Item 9, draft aquatics land lease agreement between the City of Des Moines and the State of Washington Department of Natural Resources. Item 10, South 216th Street Segment 3 project, PSC Schedule 74, utility undergrounding agreement reconciliation. Item 11, AHBL Consultant Services Contract Housing Action Plan. Item 12, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender questioning Pride Month proclamation. Item 13, Juneteenth proclamation, and that concludes the consent calendar, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Nutting.
I move to approve the consent calendar as read.
Thank you. I have second. Is there any council member that wishes to pull an item? Councilmember Steinmetz, you were first.
Yes, I want to pull items 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, and 11.
Councilmember Harris?
I would, yeah, that's wonderful. I would like to pull items 1, 4, if that hasn't already been answered.
It's already been pulled, sir.
And 7? Okay, then, yeah, 1.
No, I didn't pull 7.
Yeah, 1, 7. I've got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 11 on my list.
All right, so what we're going to be voting on in the consent agenda is item 2, approval of minutes. Oh, wait, did you have something as well?
I'd like to pull item 12.
Item 12 is pulled. Okay. Is there any other item to be pulled? Okay. So item 2, approval of minutes. Item 3, comprehensive emergency management plan. Item 10, the South 216th Street Segment 3 project. And item 13, the Juneteenth proclamation. So I believe that's 4 items. Okay. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Let the record reflect that all 7 council members have consented on that and voted positive. All right. So I'm going to read the proclamation for Juneteenth. Excuse me, I have to wear my, let me see if we can get it up here where I can read it a little easier. I have them, but it's easier this way. All right. Whereas on January 1st, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, setting in motion the end of slavery in the United States. And whereas the Civil War ended with the surrender of General Lee at Appomattox Courthouse on April 9th, 1865. And whereas this news reached Texas when the Union General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston Bay with Union troops, it was on June 19th, 1865, that he announced, "The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free." And whereas celebration of the end of slavery, which became known as Juneteenth, is the oldest known public celebration of the end of slavery in the United States. And whereas Juneteenth commemorates African American freedom and celebrates the successes gained through education and greater opportunity. And whereas, on a larger scale, celebration of Juneteenth reminds each of us of the precious promise of freedom, equality, and opportunity, which are the core of the American dream. And now, therefore, the Des Moines City Council hereby proclaims June 19th as the day to celebrate as Juneteenth 2022, signed by the Mayor, Matt Mahoney, on this day. All All right, we're gonna start with, we're gonna go in order of the items numerically. I think that's the simplest way to do. So I'll start with item 1, and Councilmember Harris, you were the one that called that out, so I'll give you the floor.
I did, Mayor. Thank you. I've had this sort of ongoing kerfuffle since I've been on the council. Every once in a while, I will ask to see an invoice copy, which is part of the vouchers. Now, this time the vouchers are $5.7 million. And for those of you unfamiliar, the voucher report is a list of all of the bills that the checks that the city is going to pay. They've been audited, but legally, the council is required to vote to approve them. So I think about maybe 24 times over the thousands of bills I've looked at, I've asked to see invoice copies. And I asked to see like 10, and I got a letter or a note from the city manager saying that I was basically illegally violating council member interference. And so, you know something? Having run a couple of businesses, if my bookkeeper ever brought me a list of checks to sign and refused to show me the invoice copies, I'd fire her right then, okay? And I am sorry, I swear to God. You know, the funny thing is, I used to write accounting software, okay? I've spent decades trying to make life super easy. Hang on.
No, Councilmember Harris.
For bookkeepers, okay? And
What's
if
your
it's
point here?
onerous,
Let's get to the point.
if it is onerous to print out 10 invoice copies, all right, then that's not my fault. That's a process thing, okay? But there's no way I'm gonna feel guilty about asking to see invoice copies on $5.7 million, okay?
okay.
And I'm just not gonna vote for it, and that's it.
Thank you. I want to correct in the public that the reason this was done is council members went straight to the finance department for the information. We're required to go through the city manager. And when you go straight to the finance department, you're in violation of RCWs. That's what the city manager is calling out. With that, we'll take a vote.
You have a point of order.
Do I have I need a motion.
I move to approve consent calendar item 1.
Is there a second? All those in favor of item 1, raise your right hand. 6. I see Councilmember Pennington. I see Councilmember Steinmetz. I see Councilmember, or Deputy Mayor Buxton, Councilmember Nutting, Councilmember Oxiger. All those opposed? And myself. Councilmember Harris. All those opposed? Councilmember Harris. Item 1 passes 6-1. All right, we're going to move on to item 4, contract for senior services. I believe Councilmember Steinmetz, you pulled it. You have the floor.
Yes, I don't believe that this is an appropriate item to have on the consent calendar. We deserve to have a presentation on this. We've had that contract in place since, I think it was 2018. It was passed without much discussion or forethought, and with a substantial change in policy to essentially contract out the running of senior services rather than keeping them in-house. I'd like to know how it went. I'd like to know what our measurables are. I'd like to know exactly what we're asking for. I'd like to know how well that last contract went. Oh, thank you. And, you know, I think we need a full presentation on this so everybody has the opportunity to be informed, to ask the questions that they want to ask. And, you know, I think that was well demonstrated on the animal control presentation and the comprehensive emergency management presentation. And so I'd just like that to be the same.
Councilmember Steinmetz, are you asking for at least a review of the past couple of years on a general performance evaluation?
I am asking that this matter be put over 1 to 2 council meetings so that we can have a presentation from staff on this with the appropriate information that we would expect on it.
But you don't want to ask those questions now, or anything of that line?
Well, I want to make sure that staff is prepared.
Okay.
I don't
second.
Throw them under the bus, just you can't surprise them like some people do.
Okay. Is that the end of your remarks? Okay.
Table this,
No, not table, reschedule.
reschedule.
Yeah.
Whatever the proper.
So, okay, so is there anybody else that wishes to discuss it? Councilmember Oxiger is next.
Yes, in the contract, and I looked back through the previous ones, there were quarterly reports required as to how things were going. Those would have provided us an objective view of what was going on. Instead, what we've got in the information here is a subjective response that everything's going fine. Well, this was a pilot project, and it's been 4 years in the making, and we have not had a report. And one of the other things I find concerning is that I don't understand what committee process this went through. We have a senior citizens advisory committee, and there's no indication that they ever had a chance to review or to consider this. So I agree with Councilmember Steinmetz that we need some answers.
Councilmember Harris.
I would second Councilmember Steinmetz's motion to reschedule this for 30 days. I would also ask that the city provide some form of survey of the senior community, either at the.
So Councilmember Harris, can we take care of the motion first?
Please, yes.
All right, so we have a motion on the table to postpone this for a couple meetings with some answers for quarterly information. Is that correct? Do I have that? Would you say so?
And I'd accept the friendly amendment of 30 days.
Of 30 days, okay?
Mayor, can I just note our existing contract expires June 16th, I believe?
Okay.
Before the next meeting.
Yes.
Yes, it's noted, but let's.
If I can just respond to that point, holdover contracts are essentially where the contract that is in place stays in place until you get to the next contract. It's very common, and there's no reason why the current contract doesn't just stay in place.
Okay.
So there's no urgency there.
All right, let's take a vote. Is there any questions or comments that anybody wants to make on the current motion? I know that, okay, Deputy Mayor Buxton.
So, Councilmember Steinmetz just said a holdover on the contract is no problem. In other words, if this passes tonight, is that truly a problem? Or would it be okay?
Well, I think holdover may or may not apply to a services contract. I mean, the service provider would have to agree to continue providing services. We couldn't automatically just say, we're continuing the contract on a holdover basis. So we'd have to, talk to Wesley about continuing without a contract or, an interim, short-term situation, so. But they're not required to continue if we don't have a contract.
Councilmember Harris, your second time.
Well, I don't give a darn one way or the other. I resent the fact that it's basically giving the council an ultimatum. Whoever put it on this calendar is like, either pass it or oops, and that's not too cool. And I'd like it rescheduled, and I would like there to be a survey, which can be easily done as part of the EATS thing on Tuesdays and at Wesley and Judson, so that we get some ideas of, what the community thinks about it. Kayleen Moon was here, and, you may want to ask her. So, yeah, I'm sorry to be, but that's just again, that's another process thing. It's, you can't tie the council's hands like this. It's a gun to the head, and I don't appreciate it. So.
City Manager Mathias.
Yeah, just a little background on this. First of all, this contract was executed during at least 2.5 years of COVID, which was an uncertain and unpredictable time. We'd originally planned on bringing this in May, But due to some absences on the council, this was the first full opportunity to advise everyone. And from our perspective, the contract and the performance of Wesley, Alex is here, Nani was here earlier, has just been outstanding. We're very pleased with what they've done and how they've addressed senior services. So, and you know, that's the background as to why you find it on the agenda tonight.
And of that, I have no doubt at all, I'll just add. Okay, but again, you want to hear from,
Councilmember Rivers, I think that was, you'd already had your second time. Let's just take a vote if we want to move this. We want to move this to 30 days out. Deputy Mayor Buxton.
In lieu of trying to comment on how I'm going to vote during councilmember comments, I'd like to explain myself right now. I was happy with the information in the packet. It's not that there's no information in the packet. There is information there. It does answer a few questions. I have spent time up there. I go up there and have lunch with the seniors. I am not unsatisfied with what goes on up there. They don't seem to be unsatisfied. It's not like I've talked to every single senior. But I understand what Councilmember Harris is saying. And if I were to vote with the three here to postpone this for the sake of conversation, I would do it for process reasons, but I already can feel it inside that my ultimate vote is still going to be to continue this contract, because if we don't, we are then forced to reorganize an entire segment or department of services that we offer to this community. And that, if we want to do that, then as a group of 2 or 3 council members need to get this idea on an agenda to change the policy in that we feel a certain way, have a discussion. I mean, it's a lot longer process if the council wants to force an entire change in the way that we provide the service. So I'm not going to be in favor of that. But I can feel inside the tension and the frustration about that, but I also appreciate your response, City Manager, with, well, we were constrained. Lots of constraints have made all sorts of cities bring all sorts of issues late to the table in this environment. So I'm not that distressed about it. So thank you for allowing me to think on the fly out loud. I am going to be in favor of this contract because it's too late to change an entire process. So even though I appreciate the possible opportunity of postponing it I would feel like it would be, if I did that, it would be for looks. And so I'm not going to do it for that reason. Thank you for the opportunity to explain myself.
All right, Councilmember Oxiger, your second time.
Yes, this was a pilot project that started back in 2018, and it was a 9-month project. And there were supposed to be quarterly reports. And I've asked for the quarterly reports, and, you know, in order for us to determine whether or not the project was valuable, we need to see those reports. And to automatically assume that we're going to proceed with nothing more than, a subjective opinion that it's going fine, there's data here. We need to see it. And so I'll be voting to postpone.
Councilmember Steinmetz, your second time, sir.
All right, thank you. I want to make sure the conversation doesn't get too far ahead right now. This isn't necessarily about changing the way we're doing it. You're right, that's an involved process. But, that can certainly be addressed at some point in a 1 or a 2-year contract or something like that. That's not the point. The point is that we've had very little time to look at this. There is data out there, or there should be, that we are not presented. We want a proper presentation. We want to know what it is that we're voting for and how it's working and why it's working and how are we measuring that. I think those are important things when you're asking us to spend taxpayer dollars for something like this. Now, I also want to reassure that, I've known Wesley in Des Moines probably longer than anybody else in this room because I represented them in the state legislature at the turn of the century. That was my job. I was the Director of Government Relations for the not-for-profit long-term care facilities. I know Kevin Anderson very well. He is a man of absolute integrity and a man with good vision. I don't have any doubt that Wesley would continue to provide services. I obviously cannot speak for them, but I don't think that's a risk at all. And as a consequence, I think we need to put this over so that we're going through a proper process. I'd also lastly then like to point out, this sort of last minute, we gotta do this now, is exactly how that first contract was pushed through. Very little notice. We had to do it now because, senior services, the people that were running it were no longer going to be here and just pushed it through real quick, so we had to go get Wesley to fix this. But we'd known that was going to be a problem for a while. We need to have a process where contracts and renewal of contracts start, at least come to the table here, 6 months ahead of before they want to do this, before they're going to take into effect. So there are a lot of process issues with this, but I do want to rest assured, this is not about changing everything that the end result is. This is how we're going to get to that result and do it in a good, deliberate process.
We have the advantage, being on council over a longer time, to see the satisfaction rate. And I, along with, I thought Deputy Mayor Buxton said it well, see it differently in that regard. But with that, is there anybody else that wishes to speak before I take a vote? Okay, so all those in favor, the motion is, this one is to delay the vote on this item for 30 days, or we'll say 2 meetings from now.
Yeah, with a presentation.
With a presentation. All those in favor, raise your right hand and say aye. I see Councilmember Oxiger, Councilmember Steinmetz, and Councilmember Harris. All those opposed? I see Councilmember Pennington, Deputy Mayor Buxton, Councilmember Nuddington, and myself. The vote fails 4-3. So now we move on to item 4, which is the motion itself. Motion is to approve the professional services contract and with Wesley for the provision of senior services and authorize the city manager to sign the agreement substantially in the form as submitted. Do I have a second? I'll make the motion.
So moved.
So moved. Is there any further discussion before we take this vote? Seeing none, I'll take the vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand and say aye. I see Councilmember Nutting, Deputy Mayor Buxton, Councilmember Pennington, and myself. All those opposed? I see Councilmember Oxiger, Councilmember Steinmetz, Councilmember Harris. Vote passes 4-3. All right, moving on to the next item, the Animal Control and Shelter Services. I believe, Councilmember Steinmetz, you pulled that, so I'll give you the floor.
I did. I pulled that simply because I think that, this kind of contract needs to be a separate agenda item. It should not be in the consent calendar. But B, it was a very good example. What was presented to us was a very good example of how these matters should be presented. And I appreciate Chief Thomas's presentation. I think it's well informed, but I think it's a separate item and it needs to be addressed separately. With that, I'd move to adopt the whatever the motion is to adopt this contract.
So do you want to, does anybody wish to discuss it before, you want to make the motions on those?
Yes.
Okay, then go ahead and read the motion if you would. Do you have the?
I don't have it in front of me.
I do. I will make the motion. Okay.
Yes. But I move to approve the Animal Control and Shelter Services Agreement with Burien Cares in the amount of $110,000 a year and authorize the city manager to sign an agreement substantially in the form attached.
Do I have a second? Councilmember Nutting, I see the second. Is there any discussion before we take a vote? Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. This suffers from the same deficiency as item 4, Wesley. And it's something that I'm going to beat on as long as I'm up here. Every contract the city has with a service provider provides no accountability or no easy accountability. It's theoretical. You know, there will always be a clause in there about, you know, quality of service or whatever that says that, you know, complaints or whatever are available on demand. Well, they shouldn't be. They should basically, everyone from Comcast, Recology, Burien Cares, anyone we do business with should come here once a year with a piece of paper that the public can see with various complaints or concerns, and it should not require a public records request to get that. And there should be just an opportunity to interrogate the representative and find out how things are going. That's how it should work, and it's what we don't have on any of our outsourced contracts, including Wesley, and so I will not vote for this. That's it.
Is there anyone else that wishes to comment before I take a vote? Seeing none, all those in favor of the first motion, raise your right hand. I see Councilmember Pennington, Councilmember Steinmetz, Deputy Mayor Buxton, Councilmember Nutting, and myself. All those opposed? I see Councilmember Harris and Councilmember Oxiger. The first motion passes 5-2.
There's a second motion that I move to approve the MOU with the Des Moines Police Guild authorizing the city to contract out with the animal control officer position to Burien Cares.
Is there a second? I see Councilmember Nutting with the second. Any discussion before I take a vote? Seeing none, all those in favor, raise your right hand. I see Councilmember Pennington, Councilmember Steinmetz, Deputy Mayor Buxton, Councilmember Nutting, and myself. All those opposed? Councilmember Oxiger, Councilmember Harris. Vote, motion 2 passes 5-2. All right, moving on to item 6. And I believe, Councilmember Steinmetz, you pulled that as well. I give you the floor.
Yes, thank you. I pulled that as well. Again, I don't think this is appropriate for the consent calendar. I would ask that it be set over 30 days and that it be a separate agenda item with staff presentation.
So you're making a motion that it be delayed 30 days with a staff presentation.
I'll second that.
And there I have a second. Do I have discussion before I take a vote on the motion? Councilmember Harris, I see you first, and Councilmember Oxiger, I'll get to you next.
Thank you. You know, and again, there's a tendency to you know, unnecessarily be defensive, but nobody supports the farmers market more than myself and so on. But I asked 2 questions and did not receive a response. One was, again, we are supposed to be entitled to see financials from the farmers market, and I have not seen those. And second of all, the city waived the farmers market $20,000 fee, so that's a $20,000 grant. And I wanted to know, did the farmers market request that? If the, you know, and I would like to know, like, are we giving people money who don't ask for it, and if so, why? Yeah, because I'm just, you know, we don't give other organizations money that they don't ask for, and yeah, that's it.
Okay, Councilmember Oxiger, and then I'll go to the city manager.
I just wanted to point out that this is you know, the question that came up with the senior services contract is that, well, if we don't pass this now, we're possibly going to have a void in services. Farmers market's already started, and they don't have a contract. So, you know, I don't see there's this big hurry. I think that there's time to get a report and to, you know, have some facts before we do this.
All right, City Attorney George?
Yeah, I did want to point that out. Most of us were at the farmer's market on Saturday. So yes, the market has started. It was a big day on Saturday. But the motion here is to ratify the city manager's signature. This contract has already been signed. So it's a motion to ratify that. And then the city manager can talk about the funding request.
It's been an ongoing process with the market, trying to support them. I think that post-COVID, sort of, hopefully, we were receiving approvals for the market to function as late as Saturday morning, early hours of the morning. So it's been a process to try and assist the market in being successful. We consider their presence in the city hugely valuable. It's an attraction for the marina, creates a lot of goodwill, provides service to socially, culturally, consumption-wise to our population. Others come from outside to spend money at the market. So that was the basis of this. We've, traditionally, tried to help the market as we can. And we did so at their request, and we're happy to do that.
Councilmember Stein, that's your second time.
Thank you. I just want to be clear that nobody's trying to prevent the market or slow it down or do anything that would be negative or harmful to the market. As indicated, contract's already been signed without a council vote. So things are going to go forward, obviously. But the point is that there's a process. I think a presentation is a great opportunity to celebrate the successes of the market and to tell us what's going on. And that's what a council meeting should be doing, to make sure that that information is out in public where it belongs to be so that we can make an informed vote. So I hope my colleagues will join me in just asking to set this over. And then the second point I want to make is, you know, I understand that the staff is busy in the day-to-day affairs of running this city, and I think they do an excellent job. And it's a lot of, you know, there's a lot going on. But this is one of the fundamental things that needs to happen in the relationship between the staff and the council is we've got to get the information to us and make the presentation public so that everybody has an opportunity to see us. And that's why it's inappropriate on a consent calendar. That's why I pulled it off. And all I'm asking is that we take the time to get that presentation and that information out there. Thank you.
Councilmember Harris, was this your second time? I've lost count.
So, yeah, and to me, it's a question of equity, all right? Basically, anytime you give a grant, a gift to any organization, you know, that's $20,000 you're not giving to another organization. So I want every organization that we contribute to, regardless of habit or worthiness or whatever, I want a piece of paper, because I want every organization that's out there to not feel like, oh yeah, you know, that's a done deal with those guys. Everybody should have the same opportunities, and you know, so people should ask for money before you cut them a check. Okay, that's it.
I'll say this, you know, I'm heavily involved in the market. I'm there pretty much every Saturday. You get the feedback and the satisfaction. I know that we're still under an emergency proclamation, which I think is one of the instrumental things. I think the last couple of years I've got feedback because I've asked questions. I don't think it's unreasonable to ask at a later time for Susie Novak to come and attend and give us some kind of report. I just don't think this is necessary to hold this back the 30 days. Is there anybody else who wishes to comment before I take a motion on delaying this for the 30 days? Yes. This is your second time.
Yes, thank you. This is in no way disrespectful of the market, and because I actually am there a lot and do a lot of graphics for them. So I'm fully supportive of the market, and again, it comes back to the issue of process. And, you know, what's the saying? I can't remember the saying, but basically it's, you know, if we can't get this stuff to the council in time to deal with it and have a chance to ask questions, then that's on staff, that's not on us.
Thank you, Councilmember Oxgar. Is there anybody else wishes to make a statement before we take a vote on this? Not seeing one, so I'll re-clarify the motion before we take it. The motion is to postpone the vote on this item with a presentation for 30 days.
As a separate agenda item.
As a separate agenda item. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. I see Councilmember Oxgar, Councilmember Steinmetz, Councilmember Harris. All those opposed? I see Councilmember Pennington, Deputy Mayor Buxton, Councilmember Nutting, and myself. Vote fails 3-4. With that, I'll read the motion for this item. Motion is to ratify and, hold on for a second. Do we need any discussion on item 6 prior to the vote? Or the motion? Seeing none. Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Oxgar. Motion is to ratify and approve the agreement with the Des Moines Farmers Market for the 2022 Des Moines Waterfront Farmers Market to be held at the Des Moines Marina Saturdays from June through September.
Second.
I have a second from Councilmember Nutting. Any discussion? Deputy Mayor Buxton.
I just object to pronouncing it Des Moines, but other than that.
Wow, yeah. I intermittently interchange so I don't offend anybody and offend everybody at the same time. Is there any discussion on the motion? Go ahead and say what you... Councilmember Oxgar brought this to my attention. I need to acknowledge that my wife is on the board. She just recently resigned from it, but I don't know if that's a cause for me to be recused from this vote. And I look to the city attorney for advice on that.
Well, she's not on the board anymore, so no, I think you're fine.
Okay.
But even if she was, this isn't, I mean, she's probably not being paid by the market, correct?
Correct.
So there's no financial benefit. So, no, you're fine.
Okay, thank you. Does that satisfy your question, sir?
No, but that's fine.
Well, Councilmember Oxney, you indicated that you do work for the market?
I don't get paid.
Okay. So you're voting on this, though?
Pardon?
You're voting on this?
It's all volunteer work, so it's, you know.
Okay. So then the same would apply to your wife. Thank you.
Well, except that the board enters into a contract with the city.
Okay. Well, my opinion is the same.
Okay, hearing the city attorney's opinion, I will vote on this motion as well. Any other further discussion before we take the vote? Not seeing any. All those in favor of the motion, raise your right hand. I see Councilmember Pennington, Councilmember Steinmetz, Deputy Mayor Buxton, Councilmember Nutting, and myself. All those opposed? I see Councilmember Harris and Councilmember Oxgar. Motion passes 5-2. All right, moving on to item 7. I believe Councilmember Harris, you were the one that pulled that item?
I did, thank you, Mayor. So basically, this was just another one of those questions that I submit according to procedure and do not get a reply to. Why does the disposal of 2 derelict boats require an ordinance of the city council?
I can address that, Mayor. It doesn't require an ordinance. The motion is to adopt draft resolution. It requires a resolution, and that's pursuant to the city code that the council has adopted.
Point taken, but why does it rise to the level of the city council?
That would be a question for the previous city council that adopted an ordinance that says that in order to surplus boats, you need to do it by resolution,
every single time.
every single time.
Okay. I'm just struck by that because this just seems like a management kind of a thing, rather than, okay, and my other question is there any environmental impact, if it turns out, you know, that there's some kind of problem in disposing of them, are we able to recoup any of those costs if there's like hazardous materials beyond just basically their moorage fees?
We're going to have Scott respond to that. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I mean, is that a silly question, or?
Oh, thank you, Councilman Harris. No, we do, when we have to dispose of a boat, we cut the keel off if it's a sailboat, recycle the lead, we pull fuel tanks out of them, we pull all the oils out of them, we recycle and try to recoup money from all the aluminum masks and different things. And then we file with the DNR with their derelict boat program for reimbursement for those disposable costs and our time spent. And we have been successful in the past. A lot of times though, the big fishing boats and stuff that have a lot of fuel on them and different things, they get pushed ahead of that money from the DNR before like a 25-foot pleasure craft sailboat. But we do reach out every time we dispose of one and try to recoup all that cost.
Can you go back to the slip owner and?
If we know the slip owner too, yes. We also do file and, what's the word? Yeah, thank you. Collection, send them to collection agencies, yes.
Okay, thank you, that's all.
Is there any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, I'll make the motion. Motion is to adopt draft resolution 22-026, authorizing removal and or sale of the abandoned vessels Peggy-O, WN 557, 8JE, and the Hobo, WN 881 BM in an appropriate, financial, responsible, and environmentally sound manner. Second. Councilmember Nutting is seconded. Go ahead and take the vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. I'm just gonna say 7-0, unanimous. All right, moving on to item 8. I believe that was Councilmember Steinmetz as well. You have the floor, sir.
Yeah, it's the same thing, that this is inappropriately on the consent calendar, and so I wanted to pull it off of that. Here there is $27,000 apparently that we're going to pay in order to do minor home repairs. This project has been going on for quite a while. I think it's a fine opportunity to publicize it in terms of a presentation. And so I'd make this a motion to make this a separate agenda item. I guess 30 days seems to be the standard time. And that we have that presentation from staff on it so that we can understand exactly what it is that we're doing.
Okay.
Being asked.
So we have a motion. I'll let the city manager
Unless
comment.
my reading, which is possible, betrays me, we're receiving $27,500.
Oh, I misread. Sometimes my reading betrays me. So,
And just,
all the more reason that I think that, we need to have some sort of presentation to put this out there. The city, if this is a success, and generally I think this program has been a success, we need to celebrate the successes as much as we do, try to resolve the other issues that might occur. And so, all the more reason why this shouldn't be on the consent calendar. This needs to be a separate presentation. Thank you.
Do I have so let me clarify before we have further discussion. You're making a motion again that this item be postponed 30 days with a presentation.
Correct.
Correct. Do I have a second?
Yeah.
I'll take Councilmember Oxiger this time, put you on the record, sir, even though I saw you both at the same time. Okay, let's open it up for discussion. Deputy Mayor Buxton, you have the floor.
If there is almost anything that should go on a consent we've been doing this now. So it's a yearly thing. We advertise it. It's talked about in city currents on a pretty regular basis. It goes out to the community on community pages on a regular basis. There's never any complaints when people get their house list. I just, no, I'm not going to agree to postpone this for presentation. This is a great program. We're getting money. And somebody else, and what is it? Somebody, I think it's the city of Covington actually, takes care of it. So you don't even have to administrate it.
City Manager Mathias.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to support factually what the Deputy Mayor just said, we've received these funds since 2006, and I believe every year the funds have appeared on the consent agenda. Thank you.
Councilmember Harris.
Yeah, there seems to be this kind of, what do they call it, pivoting kind of a deal. Nobody's, questioning the valid worthiness and wonderfulness of any of these programs, I don't think. It's basically a question of advertising. It's in the city currents for sure 4 times a year with an email address. And it seems that it rises to the level of, I don't know, like a web page at least, or, just getting the word out a bit more. And yeah, it's on the consent agenda, so it's a good thing to pull it and just, because otherwise, how else are you going to mention that it needs a bit more promotion? Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Councilmember Harris. I have a question. If I'm not mistaken, isn't this service, especially with those services that reach out to those might be economically disadvantaged, senior, et cetera, isn't this made known to them where they would usually tap those resources and this would be available?
Yeah, Mayor, to my knowledge, it comes from CDBG money, which is designated to help low-income folks, with who need home repair or whatever. It's and I'm also not aware of money being left over for lack of advertising, but I could be mistaken.
Are there any other comments before we're going to take a vote on the motion to postpone this 30 days with a presentation? Seeing none, all those in favor of postponing this for 30 days with a presentation, raise your right hand. I see Councilmember Oxer, Councilmember Steinmetz, and Councilmember Harris. All those opposed? I see Councilmember Pennington, Deputy Mayor Buxton, Councilmember Nutting, and myself. Vote fails 3 to 4. So now we'll go on to the motion itself. I will read it since I have it handy here. Motion is to approve the interlocal agreement between the cities of SeaTac, Des Moines, Covington, and Tukwila for the minor home repair program, including the acceptance of $27,500 for maintenance and repairs in 2022, and authorize the city manager to sign the agreement as substantially in the form as submitted. Do I have a second from Councilmember Nutting? Any discussion before we take the vote? Seeing none, all those in favor, raise your right hand. I see Councilmember Pennington, Councilmember Steinmetz, Deputy Mayor Buxton, Councilmember Nutting, Councilmember Oxiger, and myself. All those opposed? Councilmember Harris. Item 8 passes 6-1. Moving on to item 9. Was that you, Councilmember Steinmetz, as well?
It was.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Same issue. This is something that really doesn't belong on a consent calendar. I think this is, one of those things that cities get involved in that you don't generally have people on the city council educated in. And it's a good opportunity to educate the council as to what these kinds of agreements involve, particularly when you're dealing with the marina that we have, and just raises everybody's knowledge. Again, this needs to be put over for 30 days for a staff presentation so that we can understand what it is that we are being asked to sign. And so that's my motion.
So, Is that a second? That's a second. Okay, so we have a second on a motion to postpone this for 30 days with a presentation at that time. Any discussion before we begin? I'm gonna go with Councilmember Harris, and then I'll go to you, Deputy Mayor Buxton.
Ironically, I kind of disagree. I basically just wanted to have a graphic, which our wonderful GIS technician could have easily provided, simply to explain for the public the extent of the property under discussion. That alone, I think if you had a rendering, it would have made it clear that this truly is a routine deal. But because it's presented in the old school plat kind of nomenclature, longitude and latitude, it's confusing. And there's no reason why it would have taken a guy 5 minutes in Google Earth to just say, oh yeah, that's what it is, great. And so, yeah, that's it.
Deputy Mayor Buxton.
Thank you, Mayor. I can appreciate the request for process and presentation, but, and I would like to add, though, that the staff does work hard to put together these packets. And and if any of the public hasn't seen a packet, I would really encourage you. It's super easy to get one. You can go onto the city website, click into where we're gonna have our meeting, and people in the community can read this packet at the exact same time as I can. It goes out, it gets notified. I think a lot of people in this community actually read these packets before I do. They go out and we all get notified. So you can get all the same information I can. And when I receive that information, it's so well thought out. It's like, here's the history, here's the background, here's the segment that we think is important for discussion if anybody has a question. Here's the financial impact. I mean, there's so much information in this packet, and it's so available to anybody. And then we, as council members, get 3 full days to read whatever we want, or we can peruse it and go, oh, I think this is gonna be really interesting. I'm gonna read this carefully. I think I might have questions. We can then send our questions to the staff and get answers. And I know some council members still.
You can?
So I am not gonna comment on relationship. I don't have a problem getting the information that I need. And so when some of these things come up like this, and here's the other thing, if you want a certain thing to be brought out that isn't in the packet, you could give a heads up to staff saying, I am going to ask this question on Thursday night. And we have the opportunity to ask that question and get anything answered in public if we want. So we can either get the question answered by Monday evening privately through email, or an opportunity to augment the packet for the sake of the public, or we let somebody know we're gonna ask it and we're gonna call you out in public for the answer to this question. So sometimes I feel like this was appropriate. I feel like this is appropriate for a consent agenda item. I hope that was helpful. I feel like we get a lot of information already, so thank you.
Councilmember Harris, your second time, I believe?
Yeah, I would support this motion because the education component really is, I was just sort of joshing my colleague. And it's really hard. A city is like just, and Des Moines is like ultra complicated, okay? I mean, we've got these water, you know, you go to the Redondo and you're dealing with like 9 agencies with like everything. Council members get very few opportunities to actually know what the hell they're voting on in any depth. You could spend years studying everything, like everything having to do with marinas or who has jurisdiction over the gooey ducks, or just, it's ridiculous. So anytime the council has a chance to get some education, whether it be Keynesian or Austrian economics, it's a great thing because it's otherwise, you're flying blind on so much of this policy stuff. But the only reason would be, it's just we are like we're 4 months behind schedule, and I get the idea to move things along, but if you don't have these presentations, then you really don't learn. So, yeah, you bet, I'd support this.
Councilmember Nutting?
I feel there's enough information on the packet, and it's on the consent agenda. It's a 30-year, no-fee lease agreement. If there's anything that should be on a consent agenda, is a 30-year no lease agreement that just requires us to maintain. So I'm confused.
I would add that one of the things that the message is getting missed is that this was solely responsible for, it allows us to get grants to support the floats and other things for the functionality of the boat. I thought the packet was complete, informative, and met my needs. So I won't be supporting the postponement. Anybody? Seeing none, so the motion on the table is to postpone this for 30 days with a public presentation. All those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye. I see Councilmember Oxiger, Deputy Mayor Buxton, Councilmember Steinmetz, Councilmember Harris. All those opposed? I see Councilmember Pennington, Councilmember Nutting, and myself. That item is postponed.
What did I just vote for?
You just voted for the postponement.
I voted for, I did? Okay. I'm sorry.
Was that an incorrect vote?
It was an incorrect vote. I do not want to just.
Okay, so we'll call the vote again. On the motion to postpone it for 30 days, right, and have a staff presentation. Is everybody acceptable with that solution? Okay? All right. All those in favor of the motion to postpone it for 30 days with the presentation, raise your right hand and say aye. Aye. Or not, I'm sorry, you didn't have to say aye, but.
I called it.
You did well. So I see Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Steinmetz, and Councilmember Oxiger. All those opposed? I see Councilmember Pennington, Deputy Mayor Buxton, Councilmember Nutting, and myself. Motion fails 3-4. With that, I'll go ahead and make the motion since I have it here. Motion is to approve the draft aquatic lease agreement with the Department of Natural Resources for the use of the state-owned aquatic lands located at Redondo boat launch facility, and direct the city manager to sign the draft agreement substantially in the form as attached. Any discussion before we go forward?
Second.
Oh, I need a second. Yes, thank you. Councilmember Nutting is seconded. Seeing none, all those in favor of item 9, raise your right hand. I see Councilmember Pennington, Councilmember Steinmetz, Deputy Mayor Buxton, Councilmember Nutting, Councilmember Oxiger, and myself. All those opposed? Councilmember Harris. Item 9 passes 6-1. So I believe the next item, and I believe it's Councilmember Oxiger, you pulled, no, I'm sorry, item 11, was that you, Councilmember Steinmetz? You have the floor, sir.
Yep, and it's the same issue. I just don't think this belongs on a consent agenda. I think this is one of those things where we need some education, some presentation, and so I'm making the motion that we set this over 30 days and have a presentation from staff on this
Okay.
contract.
Understood. Do I have a motion or a second? Councilmember Harris on this one? All right, let's have discussion. Any discussion before we take a vote on this? Councilmember Harris.
only tangentially, the thing is, this consultant agreement is dependent upon an inventory of housing that does not exist, as far as I know. From watching skip meetings, they're not, they're like getting ready to do that work in the end of the year or 2023. So I'm just struggling to understand how the consultant is going to, this reminds me a bit of the Commerce study where we spent 600 grand on airport impacts using data from 1998. And I don't understand how you meaningfully address housing and homelessness if you don't have current sampling. So somehow there needs to be a mechanism where we get some numbers. And if the numbers are coming from SCIP or some other thing and they haven't I'm just, it's my head's swimming, man. I need a towel. So
All right.
I'm just not gonna.
Deputy Mayor Buxton, or do you want to go first? Councilman, or City Manager Matthias, then we'll go to Deputy Mayor Buxton. Oh, I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor Buxton, you have the floor.
Well, just for clarity, isn't that part of the consultant contract? This is grant from Department of Commerce, correct? That helps, this is grant funding that helps us prepare this housing action plan, correct?
Yes.
So
This grant was accepted by the city council for the purpose of entering into this contract.
okay.
Is there any, Councilmember Steinmetz?
You know, I think the confusion that has been demonstrated up here is exactly why we need to have some presentation. This doesn't even have to be a long presentation, you know, but it should be, this is not just a consent agenda thing. This is something that we are being asked to do, we're spending money to do it, and we need to be better informed about what it is that we're being asked to do. And I think the fact that there are some questions that have been asked, some disclarity that has been addressed, demonstrates exactly why this doesn't belong on the consent agenda and should be put over for a staff presentation.
Okay, City Manager Matthias, you had a comment?
Just an informational comment. This is the packet, over 200 pages for tonight. We've been behind because of COVID. We put a number of these items on consent, but I assure you, council member, that if you want presentations on all these items, you'll get half of this or less, because it takes that much time to prepare them, present them, go through the process. That's a council call. We will be happy to lessen the amount of work that we're able to do. Hopefully it doesn't extend beyond deadlines that are important. But the only reason that we tried to consolidate things on consent was there was so much work to do, and this is the first time we've been in person since COVID. That's the reason. We'll do whatever the will of the council is.
Do we have any further discussion before we take a vote on the motion to postpone for 30 days with the presentation? Seeing none, all those in favor of the postponement for 30 days with the presentation, raise your right hand. I see Councilmember Oxker, Councilmember Steinmetz, Councilmember Harris. All those opposed? I see Councilmember Pennington, Deputy Mayor Buxton, Councilmember Nutting, and myself. Motion fails 3-4. With that, I'll read motion 11. Motion is to approve the consultant services contract with AHBL in the amount of $75,190 for the services to prepare the City of Des Moines Housing Action Plan and further authorize the city manager to sign substantially in the form as submitted.
Second.
I have Councilmember Nutting seconding. Is there any discussion before I call for a vote? Seeing none, all those in favor, raise your right hand and say aye. I see Councilmember Pennington, Councilmember Steinmetz, Deputy Mayor Buxton, Councilmember Nutting, Councilmember Oxiger, and myself. All those opposed? I see Councilmember Harris. The item passes 6-1. All right, moving on to item 12, and I believe Councilmember Oxiger, you pulled that one?
Yes.
You have the floor, sir.
Yes, the The proclamation is written, and I take Deputy Mayor Buxton's comments about history in the packet. The information in the packet is from last year, and the references are from last year. And things have changed, and the local Waterland Pride Organizing Committee has, submitted some updated language with regard to who this covers. Who it covers, but also they point out the proclamation last year was recognizing the state's action and simply, recognizing the state's action. This, as it has been rewritten, and I did submit to the mayor last week, commits Des Moines to the items that are in the proclamation. So it's not just an acknowledgement of what the state has done. It's saying that we believe in these things, and so those are basically the two items. And I think that we should use the substitute language.
I'll respond to that. It wasn't until last Friday I was even aware, quite honestly, with no disrespect to the Waterland Pride Action Committee. I think it's a great organization, and if I'd have known of their existence, I would have loved for them to participate at an earlier time. In speaking to the city clerk, she resources what is approved, from what I understand, from the state-approved sites where there's been the legal review and everything else. And so we deemed it necessary that we keep the language. My invite is that in future years, particularly next May, I am fully willing to really engage and hear what they say and what the changes they want to make. I think it was a matter more of timing than disrespect. The fact that the city is taking the time to acknowledge the LGBTQI community, whether it's through the state listed way or so forth, shows our genuine sense of importance to this issue and respecting those people, those individuals that fill into that category. So that was it. No disrespect, but I'm more for keeping it as it was, because that is what we did and that was what is approved. Had it come a month earlier or something like that, then we might have a different story tonight. And no disrespect was intended, and I hope none's taken, but that was what the basis of our decision was. Is there anybody else that has comment? All right. Let's go ahead. I'm gonna read the motion. Motion is to approve the proclamation recognizing June as LGBTQ Pride Month. Do I have a second?
Second.
Councilmember Nutting has made a second. All those in favor of the proclamation, please raise your right hand. The vote passes unanimously 7-0. And as I read this, one of the things I think is important to note is it's about these individuals and the persecution and suffering they've had, and recognizing the good and greatness that they bring to our community as a whole. And I'm going to have to, sorry, I apologize for the delay, but I want to read this correctly, and my eyes are failing me as I grow older. All right, the proclamation. Whereas Washington State recognizes that one of its greatest strengths in the diversity of its people, and whereas Washington State has a long-standing tradition of upholding the dignity of the individual, supporting legal equity and the faith treatment for all people, and ensuring the acts of discrimination and hatred will not be tolerated, and whereas members of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning contribute to our state's success and strength in a great number of immeasurable ways. And whereas the LGBTQ community continues to be a target of violence, harassment, and discrimination by many, and yet continue to thrive through the efforts of the community itself and through the support of the LGBTQ affirming spaces, agencies, and individual allies. And whereas discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity is often compounded with discrimination on the basis of race, immigration status, religion, disability, and age, among others. And whereas while nationwide trends continue to highlight the targeting and discriminate against members of the LGBTQ community, Washington State continues to lead in affirming the lives and values of the LGBTQ individuals through the actions such as the passage of gender-affirming treatment acts, prohibiting health insurers for denying or limiting coverage of gender-affirming care services of the basis of a gender identity or expression. And now, therefore, the City of Des Moines City Council hereby proclaims June Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, and Questioning Pride Month, and encourage all people in our state and our city to join in celebrating diversity and promoting inclusion and equal protection under the law, and further encourage the people to join us in eliminating discriminatory policies and practices toward any culture, race, or group. Signed this 9th day of June, Matt Mahoney, Mayor. All right. All right, so let's, we're gonna move on to new business, correct? I didn't miss something, did I? Okay, thank you. So we have the introduction of new items for consideration. Now, our last meeting, one of the things is anybody that's, has any of the council members that might have a new item, I'm gonna ask you to be precise. The purpose of this is for, if an item wants to be moved forward and you get 2 other people to support you, that's all we need, and we'll move it to, we'll have a staff review or take action or something like that. I don't want it to be something that's where a platform and agenda is the basis. This was not the purpose. It's meant to be discussed in detail at a later date. With that, I'm gonna ask, does anybody have any new items? Councilmember Steinmetz, you have the floor.
Yes, a couple of weeks ago, in my neighborhood, we got kind of a rude surprise. Apparently, the lot directly behind my lot which has 2 buildings on it. The front was rented out as an Airbnb. The people that rented it out had a party all weekend long. The cops were called Friday night, and then on Sunday morning, one of the guests who were staying there fired shots down Marine View Drive. In that section of Marine View Drive curves, there are houses and cars in the background. It was fortunate that it was early in the morning and people weren't up, otherwise people would have been in the background. That's a really dangerous situation. Nobody in the neighborhood had any idea this was going to be an Airbnb. So I'm asking to refer an agenda item to the Economic Development Council that they develop some rules for short-term rentals. I have sent an email to Councilmember Nutting with some of the suggestions that I have that include a substantial fine for those that are found to be operating an Airbnb without a business license, so that we know, we can identify who these are. 2 is that they be required on granting that business license to provide neighborhood notification and a phone number where neighborhood concerns can be addressed. And then 3 is that if the police are called to this Airbnb more than once, then we do the same thing that we do with alarms, which is the second time they've got to reimburse the costs of the call for that. People need to, if they're going to do an Airbnb as a short-term rental, and it's not just Airbnb, VVRO, and a lot of other things, if they're going to be operating this, then what they need to do is be responsible for the people that they're renting it to. And that means that they have to police them in some way, or else it's going to cost them when we have to call the police out to take care of something. There are other issues that they can look at. I know some cities have set limits on how short or how long the short-term rental could be, but I think those are the 3 steps that we need to take immediately.
Okay.
Can I respond? Sure. I do not have an email from you. I have not received an email.
Oh, I'm sorry. I will resend it.
And I don't believe it's economic development that should see it. I think it's public safety, and that is, I don't know that we have any information.
So, so really quick, the thing is if we have 3 people, whether it's public so we'll say public safety, or economic development, what seems to be the consensus? Do we have 3 people, first of all? I see 1, 2, 3, so we have plenty of people. So let's just make a discussion of which committee should be remanded to, my bad. So let's hear suggestions really quick. I know, yeah, it's been a long night.
Since my focus was on the license to operate an Airbnb, and trying to hold the owners accountable, for the business in the neighborhood, without, that's why I was thinking it was economic development.
Okay.
But
Now, Councilmember Harris, did you have an opinion of which committee?
So the city used to have this thing with King County, oh man, senior moment, basically where, because I did it, you'd rent out your house and you took a class run by Tanya Seabury and
Which committee are you referring it to is what we're asking.
No, well, but the thing is that there was significant pushback from RHA, and it was run by Tanya, and so it's a public safety thing. It's a matter of code enforcement.
So the only thing I'd call out is that I think it's something that that it sounds like we're going to remand it to the Public Safety Committee for now. I will say that it may cause something else on the work list to be removed, which that committee will have to decide, because there's only so much that staff and they would have time to review. So that's something that you'll have to assess at that time, but I would almost say with it moving on, there may be something that has to come off. With that, I think we have the support, and we will remand that to the Public Safety Committee to look and assess on their work plan on the next meeting. Does that sound acceptable?
I think that's a call of the chair. I think it's fine. It will require review of the work plan with the chief. Sure.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Sounds like we have an agreement, so that's what it'll do. All right. Is there any other new items? Councilmember Oxiger.
Not to pour more on your to-do list, Police Chief Thomas. The events in Uvalde, a week ago now, and the reaction to the incident have caused a lot of concern in the community, and parents are scared. And what's really scary is in the subsequent time since Uvalde, there have been a number of other mass shootings.
Excuse me, Councilmember Oxiger.
Yes.
Are you referencing something for a referral?
Yes.
Okay, we're trying to keep it to that, sir.
Yes. What I'm asking is for a report from our police department as to how we will handle what our plans are for dealing with these issues, and possibly reaching out to the Highline School District and also the Federal Way School District because of Woodmont Elementary as to how they handle these issues, because there are people out there that are just scared.
City Manager Mathias?
Yeah, come on, Chief.
Okay, Chief.
I just want to suggest 2 things. The chief can fill in. First of all, we do try very diligently to stay out of police operations. Okay, we're not the policing experts. The other thing is, I'm not sure it's always wise to play your cards as to what you would do in advance of an incident, except to know that that incident will be addressed in whatever manner is appropriate. With that, Chief, you want to?
Yeah, I think I can answer your questions. I don't think we need to go to a committee. We have already been in contact with the Highline School District. We are already providing extra patrols when the schools are getting out and the students are getting out of school. And I'll tell you, it's no secret. You may have heard this a little bit on the news, the delayed response of the police to go to the active shooter. We call it active shooter. I've heard it a lot, active killer, because it is active killing that's going on with the shooting. We train and have trained for at least, I think, the past 8 to 10 years, our Valley SWAT team puts on training where every single agency in South King County trains together. Each agency sends 3 to 4 officers at a time, and they train for 6 to 8 hours going through drills on active shooter response, whether it happens at a mall, whether it happens at a school, whether it happens at any other mass shooting. You go to the threat immediately. You don't wait for backup. You don't wait for a SWAT team, and you stop the threat, because we have learned over the years the person will continue to kill people until they're stopped. So you go and stop the threat. There's no secret. It's been talked about on TV for the last few weeks. It's a tragedy what occurred in Texas. I don't think it should have ever occurred. They should have gotten in there and they should have dealt with the threat. That is how we train. That's what would happen in our South King County region. And we train together. If it happens in Federal Way or Tukwila, every agency is going to respond, and we're going to help each other, and we've trained together, and we train in the same manner. I think I addressed your issues.
I appreciate the comments, thank you. And I think that's the kind of assurance we need. It's not a case of you know, discussing police tactics or anything. It's knowing that you've got the backup and you've got the plan in place. And I think that's what people want the reassurance on.
Thank you.
So I understand that satisfies your request at this point. Okay.
You might ask if anybody else on that.
Well, it's more about getting support for moving further action. I think at this point, the action's what it is. I'm sure that if there were more questions, you could follow up with the chief himself. I don't want to volunteer that, but I think so.
Okay.
Okay, seeing no other new business. Oh, okay, Councilmember Steinmetz.
Hopefully this is a bit lighter, but also is easy to answer. My mother was watching Channel 21, and there's a loop that goes around about 30 minutes or so. And Councilmember Oxinger's photo and the listing of his basic contact information with the city and a list of his committees is up there. It's quite a dashing photo. Very similar to that one right there on the wall. He tells me he has no idea how it got there. I have no idea how it got there, but I think everybody on the council would like to have that up there since it's Channel 21. Do we have any idea what happened?
Yeah.
I don't understand.
So it sounds like Councilmember Oxinger's picture and contact information somehow showed up on Channel 21. I think that's more of an issue of whether that's supposed to be done and be on a public roll, or it's not supposed to happen at all. And it looks like his contact information from the website, like showed up. So I think that's different. I think I think the issue is let's let the city clerk seek out what it was and maybe why it occurred, or should it be there in the first place. All right. All right, seeing no more new business, let's move on to board and committee reports, and I'm going to start with Councilmember Nutting.
Thank you, Mayor. First off, I'd like to say thanks for everybody coming out and sticking around for our very first time back in the last 2 years. I do appreciate it, staff and the public, thank you. The Environment Committee met today, and we got a briefing on the SMAP, the SMAP, which is the Storm Management Action Planning. And this is a new requirement for our NPDES permit. And it's basically identifying one out of the 3 bodies of basins that we have here in Des Moines that need extra cleanup. So we should hear back from SEPA. It should go to SEPA in the fall, and by March of next year, we should have identified where we're going with this. There's going to be public outreach via the surface water management page, on Facebook, on the community page, and targeted emails. So that'll be coming later in the year. And then I had the pleasure of barbecuing last night with the Des Moines Police Foundation for our officers, and it was a really good turnout, and it was a really beautiful night. And we want to thank our officers for showing up and keeping us safe. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Councilmember Nutting. Moving on to Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's see here. I attended the swearing in of Highline School District new board director Azib Hagos, and she will be representing us. And it is a districted school board, so she will be focusing on Des Moines. I also attended a Puget Sound Clean Air Agency Zoom community workshop, and we are going to get, we're going to get the first dedicated air quality monitor anywhere near SeaTac Airport in history, and that alone is stunning. And what I found out is that Pisgah has no idea about SR 509. And I want to reference Councilmember Steinmetz. The thing is, you don't have to be in alignment with the city, okay? The job is not to, this is just me, all right? This is, sometimes you'll agree with the administration, the executive, but, and you know, you always want to be as supportive as you can.
Point of order, this is a personal attack, and
I'm not attacking anyone, sir.
It is aimed right at me.
No, I'm just saying that every,
I'm going to allow it because he has his 4-minute board and committee report.
So the thing is, you can at times disagree with the administration, and you can reach out for information, as I do, and that's all perfectly fine. The job for each council member, you know, sometimes will be in support of the current executive and sometimes not, and that's just peachy. So when I ask for things like the vouchers, everyone should support that because that's just finding out what's going on. And my constant challenge over the last 2.5 years is that just trying to find out what's going on, things like SR 509 at the airport, you will find that if you don't agree with the current administration policy, it can be a tough slog. And I would ask that every council member be given the freedom of inquiry as much as possible. And that's it.
Moving on to Councilmember Bennett.
I had attended a Des Moines Marina Association meeting last night. A lot of conversation about the slips and what's going on, and the lift that was down there, and the shutting down of the lift, and some suggestions in terms of what can be done to help the slinging of boats from the dry shed into the water. Also had an economic development meeting this evening, and then I attended our public safety meeting, which the chair, Deputy Mayor Buxton, will report on. So there you go. I would add one thing. I did ask that the city manager give me a definition of what disposable income, discretionary income, because the reason it struck home with me is because, again, what we say as council members is important, and regardless of the setting. But we had a history here of the city. We were within $750,000 of going bankrupt. And there is just the only other council member on here that went through that was Councilmember Nutting. And that had a deep, deep toll on the city, and it did me personally, quite frankly. It cost me my life. And fortunately, I was resuscitated because of some of the late nights and the hard work that was done. And this city is in a tremendously wonderful spot since that time. And I just wanted to make sure that the public understands the difference between the different types of spending, the position and footing of the city and where we're at, and we're at a crucial point with investors and redevelopment. So I just wanted to make sure that there was some clarity. That's why I asked the city manager to talk about that, so that we understood where the city is, where our citizens are, where that all stands, because that's so important for the future of this city, for the future of the city for our citizens and their families, and the ongoing stability and sustainability of our city, of our way of life, of the things that we enjoy. It rustled a lot of feathers. That wasn't the intent, but the intent was to provide some clarification. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Pennington. Moving on to Councilmember Steinmetz.
Yeah, it's been an interesting meeting so far, hasn't it? Drama has returned to Des Moines, and I'm not sure why it's been sent in my direction, but, you know, that just seems like an incredible waste of time, because we have, and I think everybody agrees, we are headed in the right direction. We are about to bring this city into the 21st century. If we can get the marina stuff signed, let's get it done, you know? I'm a big cheerleader for that. And yet, you know, we want to discuss vague, you know, arcane economic policy based upon a word choice that I used on a Facebook post that was 1 or 2 sentences long. I'm sorry. This is a waste of time for the council, and a waste of time for city resources. I can't believe there was a multi-page PowerPoint put together. It makes no sense. I attended the Public Safety and Emergency Management meeting last week on the 2nd of June. I was very disappointed by that. The committee decided not to proceed with some changes that I think are necessary in the parking ordinance that we have passed. Still allows the city to get the job done, but doesn't involve a huge branch of authority to an unelected official to change the parking anytime they feel like it. It's just not, it's unfortunate that nobody wanted to address that quite yet. I also attended the Municipal Facilities Committee meeting from the former month. I was at the Farmers Market on Wednesday, and unfortunately, this is why I'm wearing a mask tonight. I had a long conversation with some friends that I hadn't seen for a long time, and we were standing close to one another, and 2 days later, I got a notice that one of those two had tested positive for COVID.
Councilmember Steinmetz, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt. We need a motion to extend the meeting for, I'd say, 15? 22 minutes? Yes. 22 minutes.
Second.
All those in favor, raise your right hand and say aye. Voted 7-0. We will be able to extend till 9:22. You have the floor back, sir. My apologies.
All right, and obviously, Deputy Mayor Buxton knows how long I can talk. Anyway, and the reason is I've been exposed to COVID, you know, and I was standing in that six foot zone. I have tested negative. I am fully vaxxed and boosted. I don't think this is going to be an issue, but the proper protocol is to wear the K95 or the N95 masks in order to make sure that my colleagues are not infected.
And so that's why I'm wearing a mask up here. So other than that, I thought the farmer's market was terrific. Huge turnout. I arrived right about at 10, and I had to go halfway to Anthony's on the south parking lot in order to find a place to park. It was really fantastic, and that level of people seemed to stay there all day long. After that, I went to the North Hill Community Club barbecue, which was great. Met a lot of people that I had never met before, which was very nice. You know, had a nice hot dog and a brat and a hot dog, and just sort of sat around and talked to people. It was really quite a fun thing. So I appreciate the North Hill Community Club for sponsoring that. It was good, a very good community neighborhood building issue. So, you know, I think that it's been trying to be on the council. It really has. So many people seem to have such fragile egos, and they don't want to discuss things. I have a lot of admiration for the staff and the work that they do. So, I know, and I understand everybody's very busy just trying to do the day-to-day stuff, but, you know, let's not let the little things get in the way of the big things. And I'm afraid that's what's happening at the moment. And I hope we can change that, because better communication is the secret here. Just pick up the phone, talk to somebody. But people don't seem to want to do that. And that's truly unfortunate. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Steinmetz. Moving on to Councilmember Oxiger.
I'm going to make this brief. 3 words: process, process, process. And with that, I will say, please, Deputy Mayor Buxton, that you indicated 22 minutes. The fact that I'm yielding now, let's please don't expand to fill the space.
Deputy Mayor Buxton, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Now, what did I vote for? I'm kidding. I am the chair of the Public Safety and Emergency Management Committee, and we met last week, and several of the items that were discussed in that committee have already been either in part of a presentation tonight or talked about. We just looked forward to summer events, Waterland and fireworks in particular. We did get a crisis response specialist, Abby Ryman, and she's going to be working closely with our police department to address behavioral health, mental health issues out in the community as we're working to respond to different challenges that we have. We got a camera update of these flock cameras that we're getting. It's basically increasing our ability to track criminal activity without compromising privacy. We talked about animal control. We got an update on the parking ordinance, and of course, some emergency management. I really appreciated the meeting. We haven't met for a month, and so I just want to say, since we last met, I have attended approximately 30 events, board and committee meetings, both locally and regionally, and I would say I hardly attended any of those 30 events or meetings alone. A different assortment of my colleagues have attended almost all of those things with me. I've enjoyed and listened to and celebrated this community. I got opportunity to become educated about the challenges that we face both here in Des Moines and regionally. I advocated for interest and brainstormed solutions. So every table I was at, but 3 issues, so instead of mentioning each of those things, right, 3 issues stand out in all of those different meetings besides the celebrations. Safety, both in Des Moines and regionally, safety, housing, and this COVID recovery time we're in and how we're addressing it. So in regard to safety, I think you've heard tonight, our police department is doing fabulously, working hard to provide safety for people and animals, right? They're also working with businesses and residents to brainstorm solutions, especially up on the highway. I'm so impressed with the organization of our collaboratively working regionally to help our businesses, especially up on the highway. In regard to housing, 5 boards and committees, it's like that is the topic of the region, housing, right? So I think the thing I would like to say about affordable housing, when we're talking about it, even as citizens, and the things that we decide to vote on or advocate for or be in favor of, you can't just throw money at it and you can't just build more housing, because there's also this issue of infrastructure. So if we're big advocates of just giving several $100 million to this whole region and just build more housing units, there has to be more availability of water, more availability of sewer, and where are we going to get that money? So we can't just, when we advocate, we can't just advocate, talk about, and hope for more housing. There's a lot more involved, and so sometimes when people are reticent or they're not so sure, that's a big component of it. And if the state makes us build, 5,000 more houses in Des Moines and we don't get any funding for infrastructure or water or sewer, we're kind of up a creek or something else, So every idea, even bad ideas, has success stories. So we can't just depend on success stories. We need data. Okay, the last item was the recovery around the community. First responder safety and staffing is a major concern everywhere in almost all of our cities. And the other item about recovery that I just want to talk about for a moment is public communication. So there's hurdles in every city. Oh gosh. I am going to ask for like 1 more minute to address.
I'll give you the minute. Go ahead.
Is that okay? Okay. This has to do with hybrid public meetings and the OPMA and the challenge that our council, that our city and every city is facing. I just want to say this city is marching forward in a democratic way to communicate well with the community, and there are challenges to overcome. And I went to a deputy mayor's meeting this afternoon, and cities all over the county are having huge challenges. I mean, for example, Kirkland is doing fine with it, right? But they had to double their IT staff and double their clerk staff to make it work. That's a huge dollar sign. And so I just want to say, my belief is this city is working hard, moving forward. The OPMA that puts parameters around it was created for the protection and ensuring of the public voice when cell phones, social media, and Zoom did not exist. So our council, when I look across this table here, these people are committed, all of them, to be available in person, by phone, FaceTime, email, Facebook, in myriads of ways. And when the public wants to communicate even more, I would say we have all invited the public often to communicate. Keep communicating. We're going to keep working to improve as we march forward. We're working on it and listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Buxton. I'd be remiss, even though it's passed by as a veteran, to acknowledge Memorial Day for those that gave all for all of us. I attended the opening day of boating season, and with Deputy Mayor Buxton, Councilmember Steinmetz, and Oxker. It was a great event, and we got good weather. The chief, City Manager Mathias, and I did What's Up Des Moines. This is great. We got the business and a lot of community leaders together. We gave them a presentation on the city, got to hear concerns about policing and so forth. It was really a positive event. I thought a lot of the businesses connected with each other, which is necessary. All in all, I was very pleased. I was also at the farmer's market. One of the things that usually you hear, or I end up talking about, is all the great things we're going to do. What was shocking about this farmer's market was I had a lot of people I'd never met before who were very excited. They're starting to see the physical change in town that we've been preaching about. Now, this has been a long road from bankruptcy and restructure and on. But this is something that Michael and I had several conversations on, is when a lot of people need to see the results. And that's what's starting to happen. And that's exciting. In that emergence, there is a lot of different opinions and so forth and everything. And you do your best to hear everything. I know this council and the staff all have the same intent. And that is to make this city the greatest city it can be. And for that, I thank them. But particularly, I want to thank Michael and your staff, because a lot of the hard work when you were facing bankruptcy to that day, to hear that, I wish you could have been sitting or standing next to me, because those were the words we were seeking out. And finally, we're hearing them. So I think that's an awesome thing. I'm not going to talk about the other 80 things I did, but I did a lot. The one thing I'm going to leave with is on June 12th, we have the Federal Way High School graduation at Showware Center from 12 to 1:30. And on June 15th, we have the Mount Rainier graduation at 1 p.m. That's a Wednesday at Showware Center. 40 years ago today, I graduated high school. And what I say to the future graduates who might be listening here is I wish you the best. I've been very impressed with the student base when I've seen them. And I think our future's bright. But during your graduation time frame, especially the night after, please be safe. But congratulations, moderation. You have your whole future ahead of you. Don't ruin it on a single night. With that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I see a second from Councilmember Pennington. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Passes 7-0. Everybody enjoy your weekend and be safe.